very good afternoon and welcome to our broadcast. We're coming to you live from the Parliament buildings. We're also live from the Treasury. We're live from the industrial area, and we'll get a perspective from our reporters who are on the ground. We'll be live from Mombasa County and also live from the county of Nakuru with Bridget Ngana. Right here at Parliament buildings, my colleague Ken Muredi will be joining me shortly to speak about what's about to happen in about 1 hour when the Treasury CS will be coming here to table the budget statement. A lot of things that have been happening around this budget that we need to put into perspective. My name is Ken Mijungu and welcome once again to our broadcast. Let's go straight to where the real action is right now. Where is the Treasury buildings? And there we find Victor Kiprop, who's been on standby. Victor, we know there's a lot that has been happening. There's a lot that has gone into the preparation of the budget. But tell us, with about an hour remaining, what is happening at the Treasury?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ken. It's a few minutes shy of 2 p.m. and at the National Treasury offices right here on Harambee Avenue, it is a beehive of activity as officials from the National Treasury, of course led by Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, put the final touches on the 2019-2020 national budget, which will be read to Parliament at around 3 p.m. this afternoon. We expect that that reading will extend into late into the afternoon, around 5 p.m. when we will be able to, of course, break down the budget to the country. But for now, at the National Treasury offices on Harambee Avenue, the officers, it is literally a beehive of activity as officers from the National Treasury and other agencies which are involved in drafting the national budget put the final touches. We will be seeking permission from officials around here if we can access transport. That is National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich's officers, who is of course going to be very, very, very busy putting the final touches on the speech that is going to be reading out this year, and with regards to, of course, the tax collection measures which is going to announce to Parliament this afternoon. But from us right here, Ken, we are going to be on standby and we will be able to brief you on just when exactly the CS will be walking out of this premises. We are not sure if we will be using a convoy to Parliament like last year or we will be going by foot, but either way, we are going to be in the procession from the National Treasury offices right here on Harambee Avenue to Parliament buildings, which is just a kilometer away, and the time is counting down in the next 1 hour, Ken.
All right, Victor Kiprop, thank you very much. And in 1 hour, we are waiting for that. It's a journey he has made in the last few years, and perhaps he'll continue making it in the next few years. Let's see what he has for us. We know the estimates, but what we don't know is really where the money is coming from. But let's now come back to Parliament, where Kennedy Muredi is now joining us. Now, Ken, this morning there was a stalemate. The mediations failed, and earlier on we had the majority leader speaking and saying that still the budget reading will go on. But there is a rider because there is that fear that the county government may be shut. Is that a reality?
Well, thank you very much, Ken. And yes, it has been a very intriguing morning where the Division of Revenue was a topic of discussion at the Mediation Committee that brought together the members and representatives of the Senate and the National Assembly, but they were not able to agree. That means that the Division of Revenue has been defeated. And now there are efforts to reintroduce it in the House once again this coming week with regards to seeing how can they salvage the situation, because as is, counties can only access what will be called an overdraft, and they will be asking for money from the county, from the Treasury. But what that basically means is that they cannot access everything, but only 50%. And this whole process has to start again. Remember, this Division of Revenue bill has to emanate from the National Assembly, then go into the Senate, and we're probably looking at the same cycle. As today we are informed that senators, after that meeting, those whom we've been able to speak to, are very disappointed with the turnout of what has happened in that mediation committee, accusing their fellow members of parliament in the National Assembly of merely being puppets of what they call the national government, the executive, and more so the Treasury. And they're saying that it was not in their place to actually deny them money, but we've also been able to talk to members of the National Assembly who are plainly saying that even if they wanted, they could not add any money because the Senate has tacked to 327 billion shillings and the National Assembly has tacked to 316. What they had offered earlier on was 310 billion, but they are saying that we've been able to adjust everything else and give them an extra 6 billion. Why are they being so adamant on sticking to 327? But also remember, the Senate has been able to come down from 335 billion shillings to 327. So it is accusations and counter accusations with regards to what this is all about. So we also do not know the outcome of another court case that is happening in Machakos, where the Kenya Human Rights Commission had also gone to ask that this budget not be read, because what happened is that the division of revenue has not been passed. Well, the ramifications of this bill not having been passed is that also the counties cannot prepare their budgets, and also even the National Assembly, the judiciary, and not just the National Assembly, but Parliament, the national government, and the judiciary can also access some money that they will be able to pay salaries. But so much will not have happened. So these are the ramifications, that this is what is happening. And we just can only wait to see whether this bill will be reintroduced in Parliament this coming week, so that this whole process can be restarted and counties cannot suffer so much with regards to matters development. Back to you, Ken.
Right, thank you very much, Kennedy Mureithi. Kennedy Mureithi is right here with me at Parliament Buildings, and he will definitely be reporting on this until the budget statement is tabled. All right, we're also live from the studio. Brian Otwal will be joining us later with sports, but first, Dan Mwangi is in studio with guests who will definitely be looking into this budget critically done.
Thank you very much, Ken. And like you said, we've got an expert in studio. We have Ashif Kasam, who's the executive chairman of RSM Kenya. And just to give us some context into what we're looking into, briefly, we'll get into it a bit later. But Ashif, in your view, where will this money be funded? What is the likely magical thing that needs to be done for KRA to actually hit their target of the 1.8 trillion at least?
I think in terms of hitting the target, it's really reducing the non-compliance in the market. I think that's a critical part, because as long as there is non-compliance, the taxpayers who are paying taxes keep on paying taxes, and the people who are not paying taxes get away with it. And it's really strengthening the process of charging people not only through recovery of taxes but through criminal offences. And I think that's a critical part around it. But I think the bigger issue that we are not talking about is how to reduce the overall recurrent expenditure of this country. And that is the critical aspect. It's not only revenue collection all the time. If we don't control our recurrent expenditure and the economy is not growing significantly, okay, and we are seeing that KRA is having difficulty in collecting taxes because the economy is not growing, how will that bridge ever be matched unless you borrow or you reduce your expenses? There are two parts to any line, any P&L, income and expenditure. And I think during this process, there is no discussion about reducing expenditure. It's only about increasing the revenue.
Okay. And so what would be the most practical way to ensure that we reduce our recurrent expenditure?
I think it's really to...
Because some of these things we've already engaged, some of these expenses in a somewhat long-term way. What can we do away with?
I think it's looking at efficiency. Are the people who are currently employed running things efficiently? Okay. Do we need this many people to do these many jobs? Okay. Do we need a full government per 1 million people? So how do you also reduce some overheads between various counties and have shared infrastructure? That's not, that's not stopped in the Constitution. So we need to think of creative ways where each county does not need to incur all the expenses it needs. How do we pull the expenses together so that everything, we can cut the expenditure? I think there is probably 10 to 15 to 20% expenditure that can be cut by bringing about efficiencies.
Okay. And just closing, what do you think should be done to support agriculture, because it's our backbone? What needs to be done?
I think that's been a long topic. I think we need to look at agriculture from each sector. And the most important thing is increasing productivity, of the output, so the farmers get more. our soils are drained, the quality of the inputs that are going in are not the right quantity. People are getting away with supplying substandard goods, and we need to bring in good provisions first to protect the inputs into the farmers, but also try and see if we can consolidate farmers, have much more stronger cooperative societies that help them. Currently, the cooperative societies really are not doing the job in helping the farmers, and get them the extension credit that we need. But again, have a system around that the right people get that extension credit, not the wrong farmers who get it.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to more conversations with Ashif later on in this broadcast as we try and break down the numbers and the implications of some of these policies that may be brought up and are set to be announced. So I hand you back to Ken Mijungu at Parliament. Ken, back to you.
Right. Thanks very much, Dan Mwangi. And Dan, as he says, will be back to speak much more about this budget statement. But the budget statement will not be watched just in Nairobi. It will be watched all over the nation. And we'll be doing that for you and breaking it down and talking to you from the region. What do you think of what the CS is going to be presenting today before the National Assembly? So let's join Kevin Mutai, who will also be doing this with us from the county of Mombasa. Kevin, what are the expectations of the residents of Mombasa?
Forward to the reading of the budget 2019-2020. Remember, the coastal community is also part of the people who are largely contributing. Well, Ken, I said as the country looks forward for the reading of 2019-2020 budget, remember the coastal community also is eagerly waiting to see how much the Treasury has allocated to the Ministry of Tourism. Remember, the tourism sector has one of the mainstay of the coastal community. Remember that here we have various destinations that are attractive to tourists, and in the recent past, the budget allocated to this particular sector has been like, let's say, 4.5 billion shillings, and various concerns have been raised by the industry players, saying that is the little amount of that amount of money is very little to run the industry, and they're looking forward to see if at all that the industry will receive an increment in the year 2019-2020 budget, and they're looking forward to hear from the CS Treasury, that is Henry Rotich. Remember, there are various departments also in the ministry, and of course we have the county governments also when it comes to diversifying the tourism sector. Remember also they are the key players in the industry, and county governments have been urged also to be part and parcel of driving the tourism agenda. The coastal region has the product, but of course with the local community, or rather the local tourists here in the country have not been able to access some of the products available here in the coast. The reasons could be the high costs of living, and of course we expect all that to feature in the CS Rotich budget this afternoon. We've had a lot from the key players, the industry players in the, let's say, from the hoteliers. Some have complained due to the high taxes they are currently experiencing in government. They say that that has really, they've made the businesses suffer, and they're looking forward perhaps to see if at all there'll be different, there'll be a difference in how they'll be able to conduct the business. But of course, let's say everybody is also eagerly waiting to see with the deficit currently in the government. They're looking forward on how the plans that the government has in order to recover to that deficit of more than 600 billion shillings. And some are afraid, waiting to see if at all the measures that some of the measures that the government will take in terms of heightening the tax. They're waiting to see if the tourism industry will also part and parcel of the industries that are going to suffer. Ken, there's a lot of things that we as the coastal residents and the coastal community at large are really waiting to hear from CS Rotich to see what package he has to offer for the coastal community and specifically the tourism industry. We are waiting, and we will be hearing from the residents in Mombasa County to give us their views of their expectations, and maybe even after they've heard what the CS will be presenting in Parliament today, if they're told they are very satisfied or they'll be having some objections, I beg your pardon, to that particular budget presentation 2019-2020 in Parliament. Back to you, Ken.
Right, Kevin Mutai, thank you very much for that from Mombasa, and definitely the people of Mombasa will be watching. We still have Bridget Ngana from Nakuru who will try and speak to her as soon as we can get her on our air, and also we have Lillian Kiarie who is at the industrial area. She'll also be speaking to us shortly, but let's begin with news just in, and this is from the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, and this is in regards to the status of the 7 Chinese nationals trading in Gikomba, an investigation that was done by our sister newspaper in the last few days that revealed that there are actually traders doing business in Gikomba. So the ministry says, following the tip-off from members of the public, foreigners suspected to have illegally been engaging in business in the country were arrested yesterday during a raid on the Gikomba market conducted by the DCI and immigration officials. Upon further interrogations, 7 Chinese nationals were found to have be flouted immigration rules. Now, the officers also established that the 3 out of the 7 had no valid work permits, while the other 4 have been engaging in employment and other income-generating activities unauthorized under their respective work permit classes. Consequently, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of immigration has signed deportation orders as recommended by the law. So that is exactly what's happening. The ministry has signed deportation orders as recommended by the law. All right, let's now move on to other stories making headlines also. And a fresh petition has been filed before the Judicial Service Commission seeking the removal of Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu on grounds of abuse of office. Petitioners Alexander Mugane and Peter Kariuki want the JC to send a recommendation to President Uhuru Kenyatta for the formation of a tribunal to probe Mwilu based on the ruling by the High Court which quashed her criminal prosecution. Now, the two argue that even though the 5-judge bench blocked attempts by the DCI to charge Mwilu in court, the fact that they agreed with the foundation of the charges raised serious questions on the integrity of the DCJ. Mwilu had been accused of failing to remit taxes to the Kenya Revenue Authority, abuse of office, and questionable transactions between herself and the collapsed Imperial Bank. But the 5-judge bench had in its May ruling argued that the DCJ violated Mwilu's rights and of privacy by accessing her bank accounts for getting evidence to support their case. And the Ministry of Health now says it has put in place measures to safeguard the health of Kenyans in regards to the outbreak of Ebola in Uganda. Now, the disease has so far killed a 50-year-old woman who died this morning. She's the second fatality after a young boy died Wednesday since the virus spread from the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo into Uganda.
Kenya has been on high alert since the outbreak was declared in neighboring Uganda, with the Busia border point already intensifying health checks. The Ministry of Health issued a statement late Wednesday detailing Kenya's preparedness. Afya House says the ministry has already alerted health workers who are now expected to enhance surveillance. The ministry further says it has a national Ebola preparedness and response contingency plan in the event of an outbreak. This plan, the ministry says, would be implemented by a multi-agency team with rapid response team on the ready for investigations and testing. The ministry also assures that an Ebola treatment unit exists at the Kenyatta National Hospital with temporary holding rooms at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport where suspected cases will be retained and assessed. The Ugandan Health Ministry announced on Wednesday that 3 cases of Ebola infection had been reported in the first known cross-border spread from the Democratic Republic of Congo. 2 of the reported cases have turned into fatalities. The deceased has been confirmed as the grandmother of a 5-year-old boy who died from the infection. Both victims had attended the burial of an Ebola patient in Congo and tested positive for the virus upon returning to Uganda. The World Health Organization will hold an emergency meeting Friday to determine whether to declare the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Helen Wanjohi, NTV.
Elsewhere, Deputy President William Ruto has asked African countries to protect their farmers by buying local products in a bid to boost production. He added that there was need to come up with measures aimed at protecting local industries and farmers from cheap imports, arguing that African nations should trade more with each other. He was speaking during the 15th Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program Partnership Platform meeting held right here in the capital. The Deputy President said Kenya is determined to pursue free trade and regional integration and is committed to working closely with other states to spearhead or speed up the regional and continental integration to help boost trade. Now, Kenya was the first country to sign the Free Trade Area Agreement, but also took the lead in rectifying it as to use it in the boundaries as bridges to share its prosperity, rather.
The African Continental Free Trade Area is a logical step, next step in our national vision of greater integration. This platform is therefore perfectly at home here in Nairobi because it is the site of engagements and conversations that are most pertinent to our transformational agenda.
Or hopeful that with increased intra-African trade, agriculture will play an even more central role in transforming African economies.
Let's take you to Kilifi now, where attention is building up in Kaloleni, that's in Kilifi County, after police arrested 26 people, including 2 suspected members of the illegal Mombasa Republican Council. Police raided areas in Jibana following a tip-off from the members of the public that suspected MRC group was conducting a meeting. Kaloleni Sub-County Police Commander Kennedy Osando said they have also launched a crackdown against rogue border operators. Police also recovered MRC identification cards during the operation that also took place in Suguni and Chagande area. At Chagande, business went to a standstill for over 3 hours after police launched a manhunt in the area. Osando said the raid will focus on Jibani location, which is said to be hosting large numbers of recruits.
Tutaendelea mbele kuhakikisha kwamba watu ya Kaloleni na hasa katika Jibana location watu wameishi na amani bila uoga, na watu wanafanya biashara yao bila inatakikana, bila kutishwa na mtu yoyote.
Now, they say opportunity knocks once, and that was the case for Eunice Atieno, a maize vendor along Ngong Road, who caught the attention of Deputy President William Ruto. Atieno, who has been selling maize for the last 10 years, received a rather unusual visitor in the person of Deputy President William Ruto, who bought out her whole stock and gave her extra cash. Now, the blessing didn't bring with it some challenges, though. NTV caught up with Eunice, and here is her story.
Making her way through the makeshift structures with her replenished stock on her head, Eunice Atieno is enthusiastic about business in the day ahead. She sells roasted maize, roasted peanuts and bananas along Ngong Road just across the road from Lenana High School. She recalled Sunday's events as hopeful as she was at the beginning of her day. She could not have predicted her luck.
Nilikuwa nauza kwa barabara. Kuuza kwa barabara nikaona pikipiki ya kwanza imepita ya polisi. Nikaona tena gari imepita tena gari ya polisi. Sasa gari za tatu zikapita mingi na zikashika brake kupenya nauzia. Kushika brake nikaona watu wanashuka wakinikujia hata wakanistua. Juu sikuwa ninawajua.
For a moment she thought her life and business were in danger and contemplated running away. She caught sight of Deputy President William Samoei Ruto and changed her mind.
Nikaona mkubwa na cross barabara anakuja na watu wake. Vile niliona ni mkubwa nikasimama kumkaribia kuje kwa kazi yangu. Akakuja kafika. Akanisalimia. Kunisalimia akaniambia mama, mahindi yako unauza pesa ngapi? Nikasema bei ya mahindi. Akaniambia hizi mahindi ziko kwa jiko zote nataka kuzinunua. Akaweka mkono kwa mfuko yake. Akatoa pesa. Za kwanza zilikuwa 7,000. Akahesabu akaniambia hii iwezi kabai mahindi. akaweka mkono tena akaongeza 3 zikafika 10.
Eunice tells us that the windfall could not have come at a better time.
Nilikuwa na deni ya nyumba miezi 2. Nilifanya kulipa nyumba, niko kwa shule, mtoto alikuwa imebaki na balance ya shule. Nikamlipia school fees, tena mtoto hakuwa na kiatu ya shule. Nikafanya kumbaishia kiatu.
She, however, says that the area residents now think she is a rich woman, claiming she received more than she disclosed.
Ukanipewa hiyo pesa, sina amani kwa hii nyumba. Watu wananiambia nilipewa pesa mingi, 300,000, 200,000, 100,000, hata sifai kukaa hapo kwa barabara tena. Inafaa nikae kwa hiyo pesa nilipewa ni mingi sana.
Kenyans, on the other hand, took to social media to bash the deputy president. It a stunt. But Eunice stresses she has been a vendor there for 10 years, with the artisans confirming as much.
Nimekaa na huyu mama miaka mingi sana. Nikitengeneza hii kazi ya wanyama, akiwa kando akiuza mahindi yake.
Huyo mama hakuna mtu anaweza kumshinda kutengeneza kalanga hapa bwana.
Eunice says she will continue with her business as it has been her sole source of income. Helen Aura, NTV.
All right, before we cross the borders to other stories making headlines in the region, let's bring you back home. And today the biggest news, not only in the country but in East Africa, is the budget reading. And everyone wants to know what the other countries have. At least we know we have 3 trillion right here in the country. Let's cross over now to the industrial area where Lillian Kiere is on standby. And Lillian, just like every ordinary mwananchi has expectation from this budget, definitely those in the industrial areas and the business people have huge expectations. Share with us some of those expectations.
Actually at the industrial area Enterprise Road, which is the assembly plant of Honda, which actually assembles motorcycles, as you can see behind me. So this plant over here assembles at least 130 motorcycles every single day and employs about 70 workers. So as you can see, we are talking about the budget today, and we know one of the government's biggest priority is the manufacturing sector. So we are going to be talking to the chairman of the Motorcycles Assembly, who is here with us. He's going to be briefly telling us some of the priorities that he wants the government to look into, and to tell us about some of the tax measures which were taken last year and what they're expecting to hear from this year. As you know, right now, there are about 900,000 registered motorcycles in the country. From this, about 600 of them are used for commercial use, which means border. So we'd like to know what he expects from the budget reading today, and I'm going to be talking to him. He's here with us. So Mr. Isaac Kalua.
Thank you so very much. We are expectant of this budget reading today. From last year, we have been working extremely hard, as you know, and as I've said before. A motorcycle has more than between 260 and 290 parts. Most of these parts are imported from different parts of the world, mainly Japan and other developed countries. This means, at the importation of this, it means that we are actually creating employment opportunities to those countries, as opposed to building these employment opportunities locally. And that is why motorcycle assemblers and Honda itself has been working with the local parts assemblers in Kenya to be able to reduce the number of parts that are imported. And on this, we managed, over the last 3 years, we have now managed to identify 6 parts that have been agreed across the board of all the motorcycle assemblers, so that these parts are built locally and produced locally. And these are six parts, and we are going to introduce one more initially, because there are so many implications of how to produce this locally. Interestingly, for these only 6 parts, when Honda introduced this, we have caused immediately an opportunity of employment for 200 Kenyans in a company called Meg Cushion, and also other companies that we are working with, like Pipeman, an additional number. If the government introduces the regulations and these are made as part of the law guiding the production of these parts, we are sure that this sector, just reducing these 6 parts from the imported kit, it will create an employment opportunity for not less than 4,000 people within 2 months. So it will not be fair if the budget does not consider this. There are many factors, of course, that we know, that there is the law that governs this sector is an East Africa law because it is under customs law, and therefore we are bound by the other countries. But the precedents has already been set in this specific sector, where the automobile sector has delinked from itself from the East Africa community, because the pace of development between one country and another, especially in the East African community, varies. And therefore Kenya is slightly ahead of some of the other countries, and therefore the request to the EAC was clearly, and if supported by the Kenyan side, is that we start and implement our regulations locally so that we can develop our country. And therefore this we have been doing out of the last few years, so we expect that this year the regulations are going to be in place. And if they are not in place, it will be unfortunate. And because it's a song that we have sung, and we have been talking about it as an opportunity for Kenya. I mean, which sector has a lowest hanging fruit more than the parts industry and the motorcycle industry? Employing 600,000 people who are riding the motorbikes is good, but it's not good enough. We can get into the next level of manufacturing, and hundreds of thousands of opportunities must be there.
As you can hear, Ken, the manufacturing sector people are also very keen to hear what is going to be said today about their field. As we know right now, the manufacturing sector only contributes less than 9% to the GDP, and the government is hoping that in the next 3 years, it will be able to contribute at least 15%. So I will be following up on these and other stories, and I will keep you updated in the subsequent bulletins. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Lilian Kiere. And apart from that assembly by Honda, there is Kibo, which is a very good design for the country. It's a local manufacturer with local materials. So thank you very much. And indeed, the business people are also looking forward to this budget to see what's in it, especially budget cuts for the manufacturing industry and how the government intends to encourage that. Let's now cross the borders and begin in Sudan. A leader for the Sudanese protest movement, the Alliance for Freedom and Change, has demanded regional and international guarantees for implementing any agreement reached with the military council during a press conference in Khartoum. Now, this comes after an opposition called off a nationwide civil disobedience campaign, and the military agreed to the new talks.
The breakthrough in the standoff between the military rulers who toppled veteran leader Omar al-Bashir and protesters demanding civilian rule followed mediation led by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Late on Wednesday, protest leader Madani Abbas Madani told reporters that any agreement reached with the generals must have regional and international guarantees for implementing it. He did not elaborate.
We are saying that any agreement needs to include regional and international guarantees, and we should only discuss an agreement that will lead us to our proposal of a civil government without any discussion of any other issue. We have agreed that any agreement needs to be formed through a different side. We don't trust the military council.
A crackdown early this month by Sudan's military rulers against protesters demanding civilian rule left dozens dead and prompted an international outcry. Negotiations collapsed last month because the two sides disagreed on who should head a new governing body, a civilian or a soldier. The protest leaders are demanding a transition to a civilian government following Bashir's 3 decades in power. The United States on Wednesday named a special envoy to Sudan to find a peaceful solution between demonstrators and generals as protest leaders demanded international guarantees for implementing any agreement reached with the army rulers. Shops, restaurants and street vendors meanwhile began to reopen in Sudan's capital on Wednesday after the strike was called off, although many residents still remained indoors after last week's deadly crackdown on protesters that left dozens dead. Sudan has been controlled by a military council since it ousted veteran President Omar al-Bashir in April. The military ousted President Omar al-Bashir in April, promising a 3-year transitional period.
And out of the region to something very close to our profession, Amnesty International has accused Russian authorities of contempt for solidarity and rights following the detention of more than 400 people, including opposition leader Alexei Navalny, during a peaceful but unsanctioned march against the alleged impunity and corruption of law enforcement agencies. Now, Russia police moved in against unsanctioned march amid cries of shame and stop police terror. Some of the protesters wore T-shirts in support of Ivan Gulenov, an investigative journalist who was last week arrested on allegations of trumped-up drug charges. Gulenov's arrest sparked outrage and triggered unprecedented solidarity among Russians, with 3 top newspapers publishing the same front page quote, "I am / we are Ivan Gulenov" in giant letters on Monday. Many at the march called for reforms on Russia's tainted law enforcement agencies and the release from prison of many victims of police abuse. Now let's take you to Hong Kong now, which is currently facing growing international pressure over a controversial extradition bill that has prompted violent street protests, leaving 79 people so far hurt, with 2 in serious and critical condition on Wednesday. The European Union became the latest grouping to add its voice to a growing chorus of criticism over the bill. Now, police used rubber bullets and tear gas to break up crowds Wednesday after demonstrators who are angry over legislations say they will leave people vulnerable to China and politicized justice system. They blocked the roads and brought the city to a standstill. Demonstrators who surrounded the City Legislative Council, which is its government, forced postponement of the reading of the bill, but Hong Kong's pro-Beijing leaders, Carrie Liam, has shown no sign of backing down and says the protests were organized riots. Now, Hong Kong has been galvanized by political unrest in recent years as fears cite that Beijing is trying to stamp the city's unique freedom and culture. And Brian O'Toole has been very patient, waiting for his time, and it's now time for sports. Let's play, Brian.
All right, thank you so much, Ken. A lot to look out for. Also, sports is expecting to know how much will be given from sports that is on the budget, but then we'll be discussing that and much more later on. But for now, France scored a controversial VAR awarded second half penalty.
budget. Thank you very much for all the support, and thank you for watching. But remember, we are right here in Parliament, and we'll ensure that we cover the tabling of the budget statement until it's read, and obviously we'll be following up, and we'll have analysts in studio. Dan Mwangi will be speaking to them, and right here my colleagues Kenneth Mureithi and Vincent Oduor have been covering this, and they continue to cover this until when the Treasury CS will go into Parliament to table this budget statement. You know, gentlemen, the most fascinating thing for me in the current budget is the amount that it has been increasing year in, year out, and this time around it's also gone up, and they have a deficit that we still don't know how it's going to be funded. But I just want your perspective on this even as we close. What stands out? You've seen the budget statement. What we don't know is the measures that they'll put in place to collect this money or to put this money together. We know there's a budget deficit. We know they have to look for this money to plug in that deficit. We know they'll be borrowing at some particular point. But Vincent, looking at it, what stands out for you?
For me, this idea of having an expansionist policy in terms of the budgeting process, because you realize when you look at the previous financial year, every fiscal year, we have an increase in terms of budgetary allocation, from the days of billions to the days of now we are getting up to 3 trillion shilling. And you know, basically, when you try to look at the budget, you realize Treasury CS Henry Rotich has just decided to increase in domestic borrowing. He has also decided to increase foreign borrowing. That's basically to try and bridge the gap that has really transpired, especially when it comes to the deficit. And that is something that we've been seeing in each and every fiscal year. And it's something his critics are not happy about at all.
Okay. Ken, what stands out for you?
Well, Ken, what Vincent Oduor says is very critical, and I've had it even in the corridors of Parliament. And the members of Parliament, some of them from the Senate, are even saying that this thing about Kenya increasing its budget every year is now becoming something that is not very good. Remember, there is nothing wrong, even some analysts have been saying, there is nothing wrong in saying that as a country, let us go with realistic figures. And this time round, we are putting the budget at 3 trillion, yet we are denying counties 327 billion shillings as they have been asking for. Remember, I've had some interviews with some members of Parliament, and including those from the National Assembly, the leader of majority and the chairperson of the Budget Committee. And they are saying that it is not realistic that counties are asking for more money, yet there is no money. But remember, we've increased the budget from what it was last year, and we've added it to 3 trillion.
Which the expectation is that this money goes somewhere, and that's
this money goes there
Okay.
somewhere, and we are going to fund some projects, including the big four from what the president has been wants to leave as a legacy. But then again, you will have to look at it from a critical eye. As a country, are we able to do this? I remember yesterday one of ours, Jen Goiri, had an interview with CS Rotich, and he says that what is wrong with paying taxes? Other countries in East Africa are paying
even higher than us.
Even higher than us. But remember, what also goes into your pocket, your employer is not giving you more. That is the thinking that Kenyans have.
All right, we have a few minutes, Ken, and I'd just like you two gentlemen to weigh in on this, the fact that there's a standoff between the Senate and the National Assembly. First, Vincent, are we likely to see the senators coming into the main chamber of the National Assembly?
That is something we can base it on probability. It is a matter of wait and see. Because when there's a stalemate, they're unhappy with each other. So that's something we are waiting to see. But what has caused this stalemate? Other members of Parliament or senators or members of the National Assembly, some have a point, because they're saying, you are telling us to increase the amount of money we allocate to these counties, and yet for the previous years we've seen a lot of money being embezzled in these counties and mismanagement of public funds. And therefore for them, they feel it's like, senators want us to increase money, money that is going to lost. And that's something that we're waiting to see what will transpire from now.
Finally, in less than a minute, Ken, it's definite that the CS Treasury is going to come to Parliament and there's no disruption, right? Just in 1 minute as we close.
Yes, I have not heard of any disruption. Remember, the Senate will be sitting in their chamber, and the members of the National Assembly will be in their chamber. So the CS will be coming to read this budget policy on the floor of the National Assembly, because that is where he reports to.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And Kennedy Mureithi and Vincent Oduor will be covering this for us. Thank you very much for watching. Be on standby because we are back and Dan is in studio. Thank you very much for watching. Stay with NTV and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
This is NTV.
in light of the dynamics that have come in regards to the passing of the Division of Revenue Bill having not been done, and as it stands, AFRICOG, Kenya Human Rights Commission, Transparency International and TISA have moved to court seeking to stop the CS from tabling the budget before passing the Division of Revenue Bill. And so we're to see whether the courts are going to rule in their favor or not, and something to keep an eye on. But now just to get into a discussion and just again highlight some of the things we're looking forward to as we count down to the CS getting there. We are now joined by Ashif Kassam, who's the Executive Chairman of RSM Eastern Africa. And Ashif, we've spoken a bit before. And what is your view in regards to this current seeming deadlock that is there in regards to the passing of the Division of Revenue Bill and Rotich being told, some wanting him not to table the budget today?
I think the reality is that the budget has to be read. Passing of a bill, yes, constitutionally is required, but there are so many moving, wheels around it. And I think, it's an East African initiative, and Kenya cannot be seen not to adhere to that initiative. So I think, it's just fair for everybody that, the budget is read and we know where we are with the overall thing. And if there is a amendment to the revenue, the budget is just a statement of intent today. Everything has to be passed anyway through a formal vote of parliament. So I don't think so a statement of intent should be stopped just because there is one small technical deadlock.
Okay. And what would happen in a case where if the court was to rule in favor of the agencies that have gone to seek the CS to be barred from that?
Well, then the government, Rotich will have a problem of not reading the budget today. But it just puts everything into uncertainty in terms of what are the revenue what are the revenue measures. There's some revenue measures that come in straight away. There are some revenue measures that come in on 1st of July. It just creates more uncertainty.
Okay. And so let's now go back again, just the basic of this. What's your general feeling about the budget so far in regards to the estimates that were tabled for Parliament?
My own sense is that increasing ordinary revenue collection by 285 billion shillings is really a tough ask, and the reality is that the economy is not growing at this rate. That your economy is not growing at 20%. So how do you increase your tax collections by 20%? Even if you say that there is a lot of parallel economy or non-compliant people, I think the majority of the large companies are compliant. And what is happening is that this current situation is really making it, really creating an uncertain environment within which businesses are working, because there's a lot of frustrations, in terms of very area audits and having to deal with all these uncertainty. And a lot of businesses, the overall cost of compliance is keeping on going up, and the expectation is that everybody is not complying rather than focusing on the non-compliant businesses. And I think that's a big challenge.
Okay. And when you think about the challenge, again, of financing this budget, there's some experts who've said that probably the government should consider a stimulus program where it will possibly bring down some of the taxation rates as a way to create incentive for companies to then invest more because it becomes a lower cost of doing business. Do you think it's a viable option?
I don't think so. There is a viable option unless you have a massive investment in those industries. Look at what has happened to paper. Last year we said that paper companies are going to come up and produce locally, okay? But there isn't any big player in the market. Probably it's 200-300 tons of paper that is produced here. We're going to increase the duty on paper, okay? That itself has increased the cost of raw material and the ultimate product where 90% of the paper is sought outside. The same thing is in machinery, some certain spares and others where duties have gone up, and it just increases the cost of doing business. I think the overall issue is that if you want to give a stimulus package, first build the infrastructure, ensure that those companies are there, and when they're at the level of ready to produce 25, 30, 40% of the market, then is when you should really look at the initiatives, not by just one or two small enterprises that are there where you're giving the stimulus. On the other hand, there are certain duties that are very high that are actually creating a parallel economy, like electronics. If you're not going to produce electronics in this country, why do we why do we tax them at 25, 30%? Reduce the duty so it becomes more affordable and people buy through the official channel. So we need to look at both sides whether there is really an industry that needs to be helped. And the industry that really needs to be helped with the stimulus package is the agricultural industry. That's the backbone of this country. I don't think so there's enough money going into that industry.
Okay, we'll go back into this conversation in just a bit. I want to have our sports anchor and reporter, Brian Otwal, to give us the gist of what the sports world is looking forward to in regards to this budget, what Rotich is going to be speaking about. Brian Otwal, give us a brief of what are some of the big things that are being looked forward to by the sports world, because some of the things that have come up over the years, for instance, include the issue of stadia, for instance, or we have the issue of financing different national teams. We know some of the monies had been coming from a fund, or either it's the sports fund, some of whose monies were going to come from different sources, and so the sports world at times, and alongside also the arts and culture players, have felt for the years that they have been neglected and not given as much prominence, yet they provide a lot of resource towards the gross domestic product of this country. They go towards, they provide a lot of finance going towards financing the budget. And again, the budget keeps increasing, which had been mentioned earlier on by Kennedy Mureithi when they were at Parliament, talking about how much of a concern it has become when it comes to financing the budget. And so Brian Otwal joins us and now tells us what to expect, what to expect in regards to the sports world. Brian?
All right, thank you so much, Dan. Indeed, a lot to look out for in sports. Being a budget day, expectations is high, and estimates have been thrown out there between 15 to 20 billion, for perhaps looking at it with the most events that are expected in this coming year. But then looking at this financial year that is coming to an end, 2018-2019 was awarded probably around 200 million shillings for construction of sports academy that was launched in 2015, and the construction is ongoing as well. 300 million was also awarded for completion of ultra-modern, that is the National Library, but that going to culture, being that this ministry has sports, culture and arts, but then the 300 million going to culture. Looking at all the other events in sports, majorly has been supported by the National Sports Fund. This coming in place and supporting 3 events already in place right now, being that the Kenya Open Golf Tournament that was held in the beginning of the year to a tune of 250 million shillings. That event happening right here in Nairobi at the Karen Golf and Country Club. Also, we have the national team, that is the Harambee Stars, going to take part at the Africa Cup of Nations that is in Cairo, Egypt. They were supported to the tune of 244 million shillings, majorly from the sports fund as well. And this as they continue their preparations in Paris ahead of their travel on 19th for Cairo, Egypt, for the competition that begins on the 21st. They were supported by the government to the tune of 244 million shillings, thanks to the sports fund. Also, there was a payment of over 181 million shillings to the athletes. This money that was backdated way back to 2010. These athletes who have represented Kenya at different international competitions, among them Olympics, World Championships, World Under-20, World Under-18, as well as junior and youth competitions that have been represented by Kenyan athletes, bringing in medals from all events that they have been participating in. So a lot has been spent in this, and the 181 million shillings will come to support the teams that brought in medals. Let's look at a few of the promises that were given. This, among them, the stadia. Remember, we had 9 stadia that were promised, but then so far none has come to pass, none has come through in terms of better construction. But we have Kasarani, which is the only international stadium that is fit, and Kasarani, it is leaking not into any good standards so far, but then indeed it is the best that we have in the country. Nyayo Stadium is yet to be opened as well for competitions and events, so we want to see or expect to see if that will come to place and competitions and tournaments go into Nyayo Stadium and other stadia be constructed in time as promised. That is by the government, the Jubilee government, the 9 stadia that they had promised. And away from that, 2019-2020, as the 2019 completes, we have competitions coming in as well from August and June, and also in 2020 we'll be having competitions. Just a run over on the competitions. Kenya will be hosting the World Under-20 Athletics Championship that will be at the Kasarani Stadium. We remember we hosted the World Under-18 and it was a success. World Under-20 will be coming to pass as well right here in Nairobi. A budget is yet to be brought out on the same. Africa Games will be there. Qualifiers are ongoing, and Kenya will be represented in volleyball, athletics, as well as taekwondo and boxing. Qualifiers among other fringe sports in basketball as well. This being the 12th edition in Morocco, that is in Rabat, and World Under-20 Rugby Trophy that the Chipu will be representing Kenya at the Brazil World Under-20 Trophy, among others, Olympics and the World Championship. So indeed, a lot expected from the budget that will help sport. That will help sports.
Thank you very much, Brian Otwal, for that quick and comprehensive brief on the same. And Ashif, we do see a number of cases where we have some of these sectors that seem they are undervalued, underestimated, or should I say under-facilitated. There's a lot of pronouncements of we will support this, we will do this, but when it comes to where the rubber meets the road, which on one platform is the budgeting, it does not seem like the same book is being read on the same page. What needs to be done to support, the likes of sports and the arts and culture?
I think at the end of the day, any expense, you look at first, you have to pay salaries, you have to pay your utilities and other things before you can spend onto the other areas that are important. I think that's where the challenge is today, that we are finding it difficult to collect the revenue, yet we have to make the day-to-day expenditure. And unless we balance how, what is our priority expenditure, and what is the expenditure that would be ring-fenced to create, boost in certain sectors of the economy, then, we will not see that every office is running in tandem. Like I was just looking at the football issue, we have got 250 million shillings for the Kenya football team, which translates to about 8 million shillings a player. How much of that is really reaching the player? How much of it is really going into the economy to boost that economy? And how much is going into expenses that are overstated? And I think those are the questions which are really taking us down, because if it's 8 million shillings a player, and if each player is not getting $50,000, $60,000 from that, okay, then are we really doing justice to growing their own consumption? Are we promoting our athletes to reach a standard of living that is expected of them and encouraging other people to come into that sector? So I think there is a lot more to be done, and it's very easy sitting here, talking about the whole economy. But I think there really needs to be a very serious look at our revenue expenditure and the efficiency of our, public service. And once we can streamline that, bring efficiency, there is at least 20–30% savings on the overall cost.
Okay, and we talk about, like some of the savings when it comes to expenditure. One of the things that comes to mind is wage bill, the public wage bill, which is very high, even to the president's own admission. And we've seen of late there's been the battle between SRC and the PSC, as well as the MPs in regards to the housing allowance that they want. How do we strike the balance of feeling that you're remunerating your legislators, but still not going above and beyond? Because sometimes they argue they're also, employees and should also get additional benefits and salary. But then on the other hand, people are like, why would you continue to add to your salaries or your gains, yet many people are struggling?
I think, again, it comes to the issue of the national development focus. Are all of us geared towards development of this country? And I think we are talking from different pages. We don't have the same opinions. We don't have the same commitment of how to get this country to the next level. And I think unless we speak from the same page, it's going to be very difficult. I have no problems with a legislator being paid market remuneration. But the problem is we have too many legislators at the moment. Okay, we have a government per 1 million people on average. We have got 50 million people, we've got 47 counties, and 48 is the national government. So we have 48 governments, yes, that have come in. And I think we seriously need to look at how do we restructure? And if we can't restructure the 48 counties, can we restructure and bringing the cost controls? Can we bring up sharing of resources? These are things that happen in the private sector. Outsourcing a lot of services, or having a data center that caters for the accounting of 50, 60 counties together. Okay, so we need to look at either we reduce the number of counties, or we look at the overall reduction of expenses by bringing in efficiency by consolidation. And I think that's an area we have not looked at. And the day we open that chapter, then we can pay people market remuneration, but also then hold them accountable for what they are required to do. And if you don't do this, you don't get your salary. So we also need to see how do you measure performance across all levels in civil service.
Corruption continues to become an increasing frustration for Kenyans. The corruption that is ongoing and that has happened and is now being revealed slowly. And one of the greatest revelations of corruption is the lack of services for the Mwananchi, which ideally, you find Rotich will read the budget and he will lay out the plan. The money is even disbursed, but at a point you don't see the final product. Aside, one of the things that is likely to happen is the funding that would go up to the agencies. What else is to be done in regards? Is there anything else that can be done in terms of policy above and beyond what is already existent?
I think a standard price for nearly 3,000-4,000 products. Okay, and to me, the only way you can stop corruption is putting in controls. Okay, by nature, humans will look for opportunity, and so there are three ways in which corruption can be stopped. Mm-hmm. One is bringing in better controls. This control of having 3 quotations doesn't help. Do we have benchmark of prices? How do we control procurement? So that's one. Secondly is empowering the judiciary and having a special court to just try corruption cases. And if you have this court, ruling 3 or 4, 5 cases every month, okay, and making sure that, people who are involved in this practice are taken to task, that's the second part. The third part around corruption is also the tone at the top. Okay, if there is no tone at the top, corruption, will work. And there is a saying that in any organization, 5% of the people are totally honest, 2.5% are totally dishonest. The remaining 92.5 look for the opportunity. Mm. And if you cut that opportunity, you can reduce a lot of that expenditure.
Okay, and one of the biggest deals for President Uhuru Kenyatta in his legacy plan is the Big Four, and we're seeing, according to the estimates, it had already been allocated about 450.9 billion shillings. Now, some of these programs are cover sectors that are actually devolved. For instance, when it comes to health, when it comes to agriculture, and some elements of housing are actually devolved. So how do we make sure that there's no replication of these resources, such that, and to ensure that the national government, as much as it can't just have its projects away from it, that it then create conflict between the national government and actually ultimately becomes an efficient service delivery, and that close to 500 million shillings actually goes to what it's meant for.
I think again it comes to the same issue, that are we clear of what the county governments are supposed to do and what the national government is supposed to do. I don't even think, simple thing like roads, okay, they still not a very clear thing of which are county roads, which are government roads. The other thing is, if you look at the amount that Nairobi County gets, Nairobi County probably has, it's probably over 50 to 60% of this economy. Yet if you look at the roads and everything in this county, they are not being developed. You go to other counties, they are much better roads. So the whole issue is, one is the inequality between counties that raise revenue and the infrastructure that is required in these large counties compared to the smaller counties. And secondly is the consumption. I think it's a much bigger topic in terms of looking at how do we, one, make the counties accountable, but secondly also how the distribution framework is. Is it equitable based on the number of people, not only on other parameters, but number of people is very critical. And then densely populated counties have a much bigger challenge than sparsely populated counties in a number of areas.
Yes, and the concern about the dynamics of different areas came up when the CRA was coming up with the formula, which again became another point of departure for different areas. And how is this usually factored into the budget?
I think in terms of the county budget, it's very simple. There's a formula. You take the formula of what is being allocated as a percentage of your total collection, and then there's a formula between the population size and the other factors that come in. But I don't think so. The formula is fair enough. Is fair. Totally. And the good part is that in the last few years, you've seen counties that didn't have development at all are having development. But we're also seeing counties that produce the, who are your, milk cows are running dry because they don't have enough money to, do what is required in the county. And Nairobi, Mombasa, look at Mombasa today. The road from Changamwe to Mombasa is a total nightmare. Yet this is a tourist destination, and we are not doing anything about a simple road that, needs to be, maintained. It's the second industrial hub of Kenya, but, simple things are not happening. Look at the state of the roads and the water supply in Nairobi, which is, pretty much producing 50 to 60% of the tax collections in Kenya.
Okay, and when we think about the different sectors that come into play, some of them usually get a lot of the allocations, and ultimately many of them are meant to bring in the aspect of creating jobs. If you grow the economy, it means more businesses will improve. What are the specific things that Rotich probably needs to look at to ensure that it creates as many jobs as possible, so that by the time we're having the economic survey next year, it will actually show that the government hit its 1 million jobs a year target?
I think to create jobs, you need an enabling environment for people to function in. And the government has done quite a bit in creating that enabling environment, but I think there is still some areas that need to be improved. And I think jobs will only come if there is stimulus in the key sectors of the economy. And that stimulus, the focus has to be on agriculture and agricultural processing, where we add value. And there is very little in agricultural processing in our country. Okay, everything that we produce goes out, or some people have just given up farming because there is no way to sell their products. They want to leave their farms and come to Nairobi, okay, or come to the city centers. So to me, the whole focus has to be a holistic enabling environment in the agricultural processing areas. Second one is, looking at how to make that anybody going there will want to look at buying the imported product compared to the local product, okay? And this is in a number of areas, okay? So what are we doing? Why should a Kenyan produced cereal be higher than, a Kellogg's product that's imported from outside, or it's at the same price? So again, what do we need to do to bring the cost of production? And in terms of fraud, which is also really increasing the cost, even in all the sectors, I think there has to be a proper issue that people can actually prosecute people who have done fraud, because it's costing everybody significant of time. I think the enforcement mechanism is not there. So to me, the low-hanging fruits are, number one, enable industries that would thrive very quickly. Number two, pick the industries that are producing locally and see how to protect them, but only to the extent that these industries can cater for a substantial amount of your product requirement. If they are just new upcoming industries and you start protecting them from now, you will increase the cost and the inflation to the ultimate 190.
Okay, and as you can see on your screen, we are on a split screen. We are monitoring the National Treasury, where we expect the CS to be coming out any time now. It's already past 3, when ideally he was meant to have, it's 11 minutes past 3, he should have come out by now. Ideally, he should have been at Parliament. So we are monitoring that, and Victor Kiprop is there. We also have on our split screen the National Assembly, where we have, there's a discussion going on about the Supplementary Appropriation Bill in the National Assembly, which is ongoing. This is before the National Treasury CS gets there. So we're also monitoring that just to show you what's happening, to ensure that you do not miss any moment, any action, be it the color of the event and as well as the hard content. But first, we also know there's been discussions about the tourism sector, and so this was best covered from the coast, and Kevin Mutai earlier on has a discussion for us with some experts, and let's listen in.
Well, it's indeed the D. Henry Rotich to present the budget 2019-2020 before the National Assembly. And remember, here in Mombasa, the area, or rather the region, which is the key stakeholder in the country's economy, because this is the area where tourism is really known to provide much of the revenue tourists whom we will be engaging together to delve deeper in some of the key areas that we would like to see the government improve in terms of allocation of the budget. To my right is Sam Ikwai, the Executive Director of the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, and to my left is Victor Shitaka, the General Manager, Pride and Flamingo Hotel. Welcome, gentlemen. My first question comes this way. The budgetary allocation has seen some of the various sectors receive lion's share, like education, defense, and the Ministry of Interior, ICT. Where is the Ministry of Tourism in this?
I think there's been a lack of seriousness on the government in terms of tourism. We need bigger allocation of the budget to get our tourism online. And I think I would like to see a bit more money coming into the bodies of tourism to improve our tourism sector.
We've seen, like in the current budget of 2018-2019, the Ministry of Tourism received 4.5 billion shillings. Do you think the sector deserves a little bit more of increment compared to whatever it received in the previous budget?
That really goes without saying. I mean, if you look at the Ministries of Defense, Education and all these sectors you've talked about that really get the lion's share of the country's budget, these are consuming ministries and departments. But the ministry that is actually producing all the money that is supposed to be used, look at 4.5 billion against 98 billion that was generated by the industry last year. I mean, conventionally, we talk about even giving tithe to 10%. Why can the government give 10% of what you contributed, just plow back that to tourism and see how much more we can actually produce as a sector to actually support all the other economies in the country?
And of course, with the allocation of these monies, there's of course the issue. Remember, currently the government is sunk deeper in debt, and of course there will come a time that it will be coming up with stringent ways to try and recover all these monies. And there are some departments, of course, that the government will be directing towards increasing the tax. And specifically in the Ministry of Tourism, what are these areas that you think, if the government decides to pump in more money, will definitely generate good returns?
Tourism works in a way that when a particular region is opened up, then we're able to attract investment. Once we have investments, then we'll be able to attract more people coming in. Marketing, for example, is one of the areas. Product polishing. We have a very good product. Actually, the Kenyan product is still rated highly across the globe. So really just polishing, we call it the jewel. If we're able to put resources in uplifting, profiling, and showcasing some of the products we have, we can actually get in more tourists. Challenge is every time we have, as you mentioned, every time government thinks of raising taxes, they come to this sector. But they're not plowing in enough to be able to sustain this sector so that we're actually able to grow it and actually grow the cake for everyone. If government were keen to get more money, in fact, we believe as tourism, the push that you're having on manufacturing, actually the big four agenda and leaving out tourism, it means that you're going to lack resources to run those other government agendas. So actually the secret lies in profiling and investing in to grow tourism, because it's a sector that actually supports all the other sectors in a big way.
Well, he touched about a very important statement there about advertising tourism. You know, this is how you can portray Kenya to both local and international tourists. Do you think Kenya, key players in the sector, are doing much that it is possible in order to attract tourists into this particular coast region, which is known for its tourist destination sites?
I must say that last year, in the last 2 years, KTB had been allocated some money, and then shortly after it was reduced. KTB is our marketing hand in tourism, and there's a lot more they can do given the funds. Like Sam said, we are one of the sectors that bring in revenue. So shouldn't we be looked at a lot better so that we can bring in more revenue? The more you put into us, the more tourism are coming, and the more we contribute to the GDP. And I think if KTB is furnished enough, and our Ministry of Tourism is furnished enough, we will get there and we will be able to produce the kind of monies that are wanted for the government.
Well, of course, there's also the issue of diversifying the tourism products that we have here in the country, and this is where the counties comes in, because they'll also receive, I think, more than 300 billion shillings. What are the counties? What is the sole responsibility of the particular institutions, departments that are in charge of the tourism sector? What are they supposed to do to ensure that we boost this industry?
Tourism is a local mainstay. It must be supported from the local level, so to speak. A lot of investment, a lot of employment opportunities, a lot of supply chains. These are aspects of infrastructure that you'll find on the ground. Challenge is that most of the counties, and particularly in the coastal region where tourism is the mainstay of the population and the region, actually tourism has actually not been given the proper focus, even at the county level. And it starts from how the departments of tourism are managed, who are in charge of those departments. What allocations are given to people at that particular level? What capacity do the counties have to be able to consume and absorb the resources that are actually given to them?
Counties now are starting to double tax the tourism sector, especially here in the coast. Already we are burdened by taxes and high costs of power and so on. But because my feeling is they are not getting enough funding, or the fund is diverted to any other thing, they are forced to start introducing taxes that are already there. And we, the people in the tourism sector, are really suffering. I just don't want to mention the so many taxes that are being levied on the hotels, which were already there. So we are burdened.
If the government can prioritize some programs that needs to be implemented within the sector, which are some of these key issues and concerns that if once they're being touched and talked and addressed will definitely change the direction of which, or rather that will change or bring change in the entire industry?
Let me first of all say this. As a player, as a stakeholder in the coast, I don't think that the government is doing enough to promote the coastal areas.
If the government can exempt tax perhaps on the importation of like the tour safaris, vehicles and other like the workshops that are being conducted here in the country, only conducted by the licensed companies, the tour companies, do you think that in some way might help?
It could, but there's little that goes into such kind of a move. Many times, what we require as an industry is just set a level playing ground and facilitate. People don't travel really for the investments that we've put in by the private people. People travel because of the attractions we have. Chairman here has talked about the beach. It's a product we have. Culture is a product. Even the weather is a product that can actually be packaged properly and sold. The Minister of Tourism has done fairly well in partnering with the county of Mombasa to put a Mamangina waterfront. You see, now that is an attraction that will bring people. People don't just come to sleep in hotels. So what you're telling the government, they did very well. Investing in infrastructure was one very good thing that they have done to the coast region. And therefore the expansion of the airports, the road network, the railway, these are then making it possible for people to access the region.
Infrastructure is being done. We must give kudos to the government. However, you have got to get to a destination. It is clear that we signed the Open Skyways treaty, but we are not. So people want to come into Kenya, but we have closed the skies to them. I know quite a few airlines who have applied to come to Kenya, and we've closed the skies to them. So how will we get those people to land here? Yeah, so that's one of the issues that the government has got to look at. And if it is cushioning our own local airline, we've got to get another way of doing it, but not by refusing other airlines who want to come and land in Mombasa and bring people to the coast. That doesn't help.
There's a notion that Mombasa, or that the coast region, is meant for the international tourism. We have a challenge. Us as locals, it's hard for us to find someone who really. It's evident there are people who've never been to coast here in the country. Why?
There are many people who have not been, and traveling and opening up destination is something that is gradual. For the longest time as a country, tourism was actually considered the mainstay in the business of the foreigner. But look at the investments today. We have a lot of managers running these facilities. We have a lot of Africans actually working in all these facilities. And until the destination was actually opened up, look at what SGR has done to transform Mombasa, for example. You can barely get a seat on SGR over the weekends, which means there's so many domestic people actually visiting. And this is because what happened over the last 2 or 3 years is that the private investors and owners of these facilities have actually put in a focus to try and market themselves. Because yes, for the longest time, KTB has been concentrating on the international market. But those are the movers of tourism. You know, tourism as a social undertaking is evolving gradually. And it only happens, people only travel when they have excess or disposable income. And so the growing middle class has actually necessitated many people to start traveling and moving out. But then every time you have a crunch, you have a huge budget like what is going to be there today. But then a lot of that is actually plowed back or used for recurrent expenses and everything, and nothing goes back to the mwananchi. Then it means the common person is constrained and is actually not able to have a disposable income to be able to move around.
Well, that has been a robust conversation here on Matters Tourism concerning the budget that we expected the Ministry of Treasury to present today in the National Assembly. And there's a lot of expectations. Remember that Mombasa and the entire coast region is depending largely on tourism for us because it is the mainstay of the particular region and the Kenyan public when it comes to the economy of the...
Kevin Mutai, and like he said, we're expecting to hear from Henry Rotich, the CS of the National Treasury, who has been given the go-ahead in State House. State House had a special sitting that was chaired by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and Cabinet had a special sitting, I beg your pardon, and the Cabinet considered the brief and approved the proposed budget estimates for submission to the National Assembly. And so this means that Henry Rotich has been given the green light from State House, from Cabinet, to go forward and present the budget, to read the budget before Parliament. This is when the Cabinet was meeting before when they had their prayers. They begin with prayers. That's what we believe. We were told rather, and then we could see Rotich walking alongside his energy counterpart Charles Keter when they were heading to the meeting or out of the meeting. Then we have CS Munyes, we have Tobiko, we have Farida Karonei, and Trade Industry and Cooperative CS, that's Peter Munya. This was when they were at State House. And this is other CSs. We have Margaret Kobia and Raphael Tuju. Behind there, we've got other CSs. And the gist of this is that Cabinet has approved what Rotich has in his case. The briefcase has some security features, some unique ones. And so now he's got green light from the highest office of the land to go and present these estimates to Parliament and to Kenya at large. And so we are going to be waiting to see. This is despite what those who are against him doing it because of the bill that has not yet been passed. And so this is one of the things coming in latest. However, like we said, we are monitoring different locations. We're monitoring Parliament, inside Parliament, where the MPs are having a session, and we're also monitoring outside Parliament as we wait to see the CS coming in. We're also monitoring the National Treasury, where the CS is expected to come from, where he and his team are likely closing up the suitcase, the briefcase by now, because at the time it's 3:26. The statement that was given in regards to saying what time he was meant to be there, it was meant to be at 3 p.m., but now we are 26 minutes into the hour, and he's yet to step out of the National Treasury building. And so usually he has a long speech, likely meaning that we are going to have this whole ceremony close at 6 p.m. or thereabouts. We wait to see. Nonetheless, we are going to be monitoring that. At the National Treasury, we have Victor Kiprop, who's standing by to just give us a brief on the same. And also, this is what Treasury looks like. Not much activity, but you can see there's some. What usually happens over the years we've seen is that some of the officials begin to just trickle out of the building one by one, slowly. And just then eventually you'll see a bit of activity in regards to security and the other personnel from the National Treasury. So wait to see what will happen there. And we're also seeing our sister publication, that's Daily Nation, on the nation-breaking platform, saying that all women members of Parliament have walked out of the budget speech sitting of Parliament to protest the assault of Wajir Woman Representative Fatma Gedi, and the allegations are that she has been attacked by a fellow MP from Wajir East, and that is the allegation. We're still following up on those details to know what the details are. So as it stands, according to what has been put out by the Daily Nation, a nation-breaking news handle, We don't have women in the House of Parliament right now. The picture we have there may not be the easiest to see from. Maybe we could just take it full screen for a bit, just to try and establish whether we can see any women in the House at the moment, even as business continues to be transacted in Parliament. Well, there we have one of the MPs speaking, a man, obviously, but we wait to see that on the longer shot, on the wider shot of Parliament, whether we are going to see any women there, because it's a significant issue. And so it's a significant issue because it has touched on, the allegations are that it has touched on violence against a woman MP. And this is the Wajir woman representative, Fatma Gedi. And we are definitely following up on that just to get the gist of what is happening. Just even as we continue to monitor those, Ashif, this kind of a situation happening, in the event that this is actually the case, that what has happened, are we likely to see any kind of interruption in terms of the reading of the budget, or Rotich comes and just goes, in terms of comes and just goes and reads his budget?
I don't know, it's very difficult to predict that. There are too many moving parts today in this process. But I think previously the minister, the cabinet secretary or the minister, even despite the difficult challenges that they have had in the past, they've always, finished reading the budget, because the speaker is a control, and if there is a problem, he can get people out of the parliament for causing the disruption. I think a parliament is a place of sanctity. I think, people need to respect why it is there. We might have our differences, but there's a different way to resolve differences, rather than just attacking a national event just for whatever reason it is. And they are very different. There are various forums to resolve differences previously, and just hijacking the budget speech has never proved successful previously.
Okay, and now just talking about not so much in regards to violence against women, but just talking about the vulnerable groups in society, where we have those living disabilities and the likes. We also have the youth and the likes. And we've seen, over the years, we've had many funds, some of which are now being consolidated into one to make it a more formidable one. What also could be done through the budgetary statement, what needs to be done to ensure that we don't have much pilfering? And maybe before we respond to that, we could see Henry Rotich there, the CS, the National Treasury. He's at the top of the stairs of the National Treasury. This is one of those ceremonial acts. There we go. The suit, the briefcase has been raised for the camera, for one of the photo opportunities, and he's then going to come down the stairs, still pause for that. He'll then be joined by some of his PSAs, the National Treasury, as well as the PS to Planning are expected to join him because they also play a crucial part in this. And so it's yet another year for Henry Rotich to hold up his the briefcase, and we could see they're being directed likely by their media liaison there, and that is him and Kamau Thuge, who's the principal secretary in the National Treasury, who are some of the two men who are driving this agenda. And then they've now been joined by Julius Muya, who's the PS in the State Department of Planning. And so again, that trio is represents some of the key school of the brains behind the budget, ideally, because they are the ones who are driving this agenda. So shortly after this, we wait to see whether Rotich is going to decide to walk to Parliament, as has happened sometimes with some of the finance ministers, such as President Uhuru Kenyatta, when he held office there, or whether he's going to get into his vehicle. So we still have more technocrats joining them. We could see to the far right, we have the current KRA Commissioner General Githim Mburu on the far right in a grey suit, and to the far left is his predecessor, that's John Jiraine, who is also there for the photo opportunity on the same. We could see Githim Mburu is the one who's walking back up. This must be one of his first public appearances after he was appointed into office by Henry Rotich himself, because he has a tough job ahead of him, the job of getting this, collecting the tax, and he and his predecessor are walking out. And we can see some of the other leaders who are likely to be some of the team from the National Treasury, the Ministry of the National Treasury and Planning. And so from here, the next stop is meant to be Parliament, where we expect him to go and table the document on the same. And a big day that many have been looking forward to, and a lot of anticipation, and not only anticipation but also expectation by many across the board, right from the high and mighty in the country down to the common Mwananchi, as they're referred to, some of whom feel that they hope that briefcase today has hope for them. It has pronouncements that are going to ease the cost of living, ease the burden that the economy has placed upon them, and the policies. And so that is the briefcase that we have been waiting to see, and the briefcase that contains the 2019-2020 budget for the Republic of Kenya. And so from here, we wait to see whether there'll be any tax measures that are going to be put in place to ensure that the man we saw earlier on, Githimburu, and his team are going to hit the target that in the estimates stood at 1.877 trillion shillings. This is the highest target they've ever had. Over the years, they have been increasing their collection, but they have never hit the target that has been set for them. So we wait to see whether this is going to be an out of the usual year. It's a lot of focus on the new KRA Commissioner General, especially now having come into office. Everyone is trying to figure out how he is, aside from having been a commissioner at the authority, how he's going to lead in regards to the efforts to collect this much money. A lot of pressure on him, and let's just listen in and just get a sense of the aura and the mood at the National Treasury. Okay, the last photo we've seen there was with his two PSAs alongside the central bank governor, that is Patrick Njoroge, and you could see the media trying to get an opportunity to just ask him anything. Let's send in case he happens to say anything and just get the sense of what he may say, if at all anything. All right, Henry Rotich has gotten into his car. At least he is still in a Passat, because there have been concerns about austerity measures and the fact that, we were meant to be having them in Passats because of their capacity, but many of the high and mighty in the government have not been riding in those. And so that is the CS, the National Treasury, having left the National Treasury building and now heading not too far off as he goes to Parliament, and we shall be monitoring also from Parliament. We have the live feed there where he's going to be driving in, and we're going to be seeing the pictures of the same as he and his team arrive. And a lot is expected, and a lot of that ceremonial stuff that happens at the National Treasury entry is one that is a great photo opportunity for him, and symbolizes that we are getting a step closer to knowing what the plan is for the taxes that you pay. Many of us would wake up early in the morning, go to work, and work very hard. Some of us, unfortunately, may not have jobs, which is one of the key issues and concerns that are raised over the years. And as if we're talking about even just ensuring that we can create employment. You walk around, and even in the CBD, there are people who come here and sit hoping they can get an opportunity somewhere. And Rotich has a lot of pressure, again, like we mentioned earlier on, in regards to creating jobs and more jobs. And what has been said is quality jobs, not just any job. But we know that there also have been concerns about, when we talk about quality jobs, people who are probably working in environments that are not conducive for them to be productive. Is there anything that can be done, even policy-wise, that probably would have been seconded by the Ministry of Labour to ensure that work conditions for the jobs they're creating are actually conducive?
I think, a conducive work environment is a partnership between the government and the private sector. And unless there is trust and there is guaranteed of a return, that, environment will not be created. And I think that's a critical aspect of how do we bridge the expectation.
Okay, sorry, let me just interrupt for a bit. We see Henry Rotich, like I said, he's not too far off. He's already at Parliament. His car is driving in. And like we said, we are going to keep you updated with this. So there he is about to step out of his vehicle with this priced suitcase, which holds plans for the 3 trillion shilling budget. He's been received first and foremost by the leader of the national majority, the leader of the minority as well in the National Assembly, as well as other leaders in the National Assembly who are, welcoming him as they wait to see what happens, because this gentleman, as you can see, there's no lady there, also played a part in this process of ensuring that we could have this day come to be, because they had to pass some of the documents and the proposals. So now they're going to have another photo opportunity, because they were not part of the photo opportunity earlier on, after which now they will go in, and in not too long we should expect the CS to begin his reading of the budget, which is likely to take anything close to 2 hours. It's likely to take about 2 hours or thereabouts. So we wait to see. There he is with some of the leaders. We have Kimani Ichung'wah, who's the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and they are there looking. There's some excitement around him, and we hope that Kenyans will have the same kind of mood when the CS finishes his speech. As you can see, the work of the media, not always the easiest one. And there he is with the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, that's Kimani Ichung'wah, who's also the member of parliament for the constituency of Kikuyu. So from there, he now takes another one with his PS, the National Treasury. A lot of photos going on here. And so I think after this, we wait to see now where the rubber meets the road, where we're going to see, to listen in and take note of what is going to be seen. And we'll be here to just break down the details of the budget, as will have been presented by him. And as we had earlier on said and stated, that there's a whole procedure that goes into preparing the budget, and this 3 trillion shilling budget, the highest ever for Kenya. And earlier on, Ashif, you were speaking, and you were saying something before I interrupted you, before we saw the CS driving in. Maybe you could just pick it up.
No, I was just saying, it has to be a partnership of trust. There are things that the private sector have to do, there is a thing that the government can do. I think a lot of time our discussions are what is the government doing. We are not talking about what the private sector needs to do. And I think that's a joint initiative. Like we were talking about tourism earlier, and we are saying this is what the government needs to do, but what are the hotels doing in terms of creating a unique experience here for tourists? Okay, what are we doing to brand cost? Between the various types of tourism that there could be for cost tourism. So I think it's a collective dialogue, and each one needs to hold the other accountable. And I think that accountability is still not 100% there. There's a lot of mistrust. When we keep on talking about corruption, we keep on talking about tax cheats. The government says that the private sector is not paying the tax. The private sector is saying the government is not doing its share. How do we create the joint trust and bring a new sense of optimism into this country? I think that optimism is what we need to create.
Okay. And like you can see, the Speaker of the National Assembly is there still addressing the House. And this is just minutes away from CS Rotich coming in and beginning to do his presentation as well. And Ashif, we've just seen the new Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, Githii Mburu, who I think it's the first time he's actually appearing publicly since his appointment. He does have quite some work ahead cut out for him.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are 3 critical areas with the current restructuring of Kenya Revenue Authority going on how it's going to operate. The second one is linking and creating the data center, the data warehouse and business intelligence unit at KRA, and how monitoring is going to be done. And he's through a process that will actually make or break the entire issue of tax evasion. Okay? And that's going to be a critical part, because if we can link data and through artificial intelligence reduce the number of audits, but then profile taxpayers, that will help to have green channel taxpayers who are very compliant, and they can do the business without having to go through the day-to-day difficulty of dealing with the KRA. And who are not compliant, then are answerable to why they are not compliant. And then the third part is the judiciary reform to ensure that people who don't pay taxes, apart from, handling tax cases, also can look at the criminal side of things. So there is also much more cohesion between the judiciary, the KRA, and the business community.
Okay. And one other thing that really has been a big issue for Kenya is debt. How do you think this debt issue should be handled? Because Treasury insists that we are still in a safe zone in regards to our debt to GDP ratio. But we've seen the contrary being brought out by many other people. How do we handle our debt situation? Should we handle our debt situation in an ideal case?
So to me, first, in debt, there is nothing like a ratio that is right. It is your ability to pay. I could borrow 100 shillings from you and I have nothing in my pocket, and I can repay it to you tomorrow, okay? And that's fine. I'm 100% geared. So I think what we are not doing is getting out and saying, look, our debt is X, but our money coming in is guaranteed to cater this debt. So we are not leaving a debt burden for the new generation. The problem we are having today is every year our interest costs are going up. So this year, our interest cost is going to 450 billion shillings, or debt service cost, and that's up by 50 billion from last year. And what I don't understand is why does the government have to borrow significantly above the inflation rate? Kenya has a good rating. Kenya is not a risky country. Yet, the interest that we are paying on a lot of foreign debt, or even on some of the local debt, is much higher than the inflation rate and the risk on Kenya. And to me, the whole issue is we need to restructure our message to the public that Kenya, has got a debt servicing capacity, and that is why people need 1 billion shillings of the 1.9 billion is 5%, increases 5% of the total revenue collection. Forget about what is the total repayment.
Okay, and what you're seeing on the side of the screen is the team from the National Treasury getting into the chambers. You could see the CS there with his team, and any minute now he should begin. He shall be invited by the Speaker of the National Assembly to present his budget statement. So the moment many of us, or if I should say we've all been waiting for, is about to arrive. So let's listen into Parliament now.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, fellow Kenyans, today I present to the country the highlights of the budget for the financial year 2019-2020. I do this in performing my fiduciary responsibility as the guardian of the nation's finances and in fulfillment of the requirement of Section 40 of the Public Financial Management Act 2012 and the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, has on several occasions, including most recently during the 2019 State of the Nation Address, set out an ambitious socio-economic development agenda that speaks to the Kenya we want. This has been captured under the Big Four agenda, which lays out key initiatives that will put Kenya on a bold new path of rapid and shared economic growth, job creation at unprecedented pace, and reduced poverty on a sustained basis. Mr. Speaker, the budget for 2019-2020 lays a strong foundation for achieving the President's Big Four agenda, while at the same time addressing the following challenges facing our economy. One, creating an enabling environment for businesses, and in particular for the micro, small, medium enterprises in order to accelerate the growth of our economy and create more jobs for our youth. Two, the need to be prudent and efficient in our spending. Three, the need to mobilize domestic resources to fund priority projects and programs. Four, the need to reduce our fiscal deficits in order to stabilize and reduce our debt. And five, the need to implement reforms that will enhance our efficiency and make us competitive. Before addressing these issues, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to say a few words on the recent economic developments and outlook. Mr. Speaker, our economy continues to be resilient in the midst of significant global and domestic headwinds. In 2018, our economy grew by 6.3%, up from 4.9% in the previous year. The growth is the highest to have been recorded for the past 8 years and well above the sub-Saharan African regional average growth of 3% and global average of 3.6%, reinforcing the advantages of a diversified and reforming economy. This strong growth was attained despite the rising global trade friction among major trading partners, as well as uncertainties from Brexit and renewed geopolitical risks. Mr. Speaker, we project growth in 2019 to remain strong at around the same level as in 2018. While there are risks associated with delayed long rains, which may impact negatively on agriculture, we expect such risks to be offset by continued strong performance in non-agricultural activities such as tourism and construction. Over the medium term, we expect growth of over 7% as programmed activities under the Big Four agenda gain traction. Trade relations tension, a rise in oil prices, and weather-related shocks. Should these risks materialize, Kenya's growth forecast could be constrained. However, the government will take appropriate measures to mitigate any negative impact on growth. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to how we are going to address the challenges facing us. Mr. Speaker, the theme of this year's budget is creating jobs, transforming lives, harnessing the Big Four plan. This theme resonates with our strategies towards a stronger economy that will generate more employment opportunities and provide better livelihoods for Kenyans. In this budget, therefore, we are laying a firm foundation for accelerated growth and shared prosperity. Mr. Speaker, in order to achieve rapid and inclusive economic growth and expand job opportunities for the youth, we must continue to improve the business climate in order for our business sector to thrive. Therefore, we must continue to implement prudent fiscal and monetary policies in order to achieve the low rate of inflation, low but sustainable interest rate, and a competitive exchange rate. In addition, we will continue with our ambitious business reform initiative in order to reduce the cost of doing business and encourage private sector innovation and entrepreneurship. Our current ranking of 61 out of 180 countries in the World Bank doing business indicators is not only the best ranking we have had so far, but it's also an indication of our resolve to improve our business climate and become a top investment destination. Our aim in the next few years is to be among the top 50 nations in the world by continuing to strengthen our reform agenda. Mr. Speaker, last year, I amended the Income Tax Act to provide for a deduction of 30% of the total electricity by manufacturers as a rebate subject to the conditions to be set by Ministry of Energy. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Energy, in consultation with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperative Development, has now developed the framework that will be used so that manufacturers can enjoy this incentive. We expect these incentives to reduce the cost of electricity to manufacturers by about 20% and to make our products competitive in the region. And this should spur economic growth and create employment for our youth. Mr. Speaker, the large accumulation of VAT refunds in KRA arising from VAT on zero-rated supplies has impacted negatively on the cash flow and liquidity of our manufacturers and the business community at large. In order to fast-track the return of these funds to the rightful owners, I have constituted a team at the National Treasury to quickly validate the outstanding refunds with a view to clear them within the next 2 months. Mr. Speaker, in addition, there has been a large accumulation of VAT refunds at KRA, which emanates from the 6% VAT withholding tax. We are currently working on the modalities for settling this obligation, and I intend to engage the business community immediately in order to come up with a workable solution. Going forward, we intend to lower the VAT withholding tax to a level that will eliminate the need for KRA to make refunds. I'll be making proposals to lower the VAT withholding rate under the tax proposal later in this statement. Mr. Speaker, on the pending bills, we have reviewed existing pending bills as directed by His Excellency the President during this year's Madaraka Day celebrations. In addition to the payments we have made so far, we have prioritized 10.9 billion Kenya shillings of the verified pending bills, which will be paid before the end of this month. This should This should eliminate most pending bills owed to the youth, women, and persons living with disability under the access to the government procurement opportunity. The clearance of this backlog should improve liquidity to our suppliers and contractors and thereby boost our economy. Mr. Speaker, our micro, small, and medium enterprises plays a critical role in wealth and employment creation. We have listened carefully to their concerns, which include limited access to credit, entrepreneurial skills and markets, as well as cumbersome regulatory and working environment. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate faster clearance of cargo, His Excellency the President in May 2019 directed the Ministry of Interior and Coordination in collaboration with other government agencies to ensure all imports and export consolidators undergo strict vetting, registration and gazettement before they are allowed to operate at all the ports of entry and clearance. This will reduce delays in cargo clearance into the country for most small cargo importers operating under the consolidators, reduce tax evasion, curb illegal importation of contraband and counterfeit goods, and reduce delay in cargo clearance into the country. Mr. Speaker, the government has been supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises through various affirmative action funds, including the WESO Fund, Youth Enterprise Development Fund, and Women Enterprise Development Fund. To increase efficiency and eliminate overlaps, I have consolidated the three funds into one to be known as Biashara Kenya Fund. The fund will give special priority to businesses owned by youth, women, and people living in disabilities. The regulations establishing the new fund have been published after being subjected to stakeholders' consultation, and I will be submitting them to this House today. Mr. Speaker, to further improve access to credit to SMEs, last month we endorsed our mobile loan product known as Stawi Loan, which offers unsecured loans to small enterprises. Mr. Speaker, the government, through the Ministry of Information, Communication and Telecommunication and Technology, in partnership with academia, civil society, and private sector, has set up a program known as Ajira Digital Program, whose aim is to bridge the gap between skills available and skills demand. A major objective of the program is to enable over 1 million youth annually to be engaged as digital freelance workers. In order to provide stability for the youth engaged in this program, the government has proposed that the youth registered in the program pay a registration fee of 10,000 for the next 3 years in lieu of income tax, with effect from January 2020. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the income tax in order to exempt registered members from the regular taxation for a specified period. Mr. Speaker, this registration fee will be paid to the Ajira Fund, through which the youth-oriented program will be financed for the benefit of our young people who need to be engaged in tangible programs. In this regard, a framework for the registration of the Ajira members, the modalities of collecting the fee, as well as the structure for the utilization of the fund will be put in place. Mr. Speaker, this fund that will promote growth of local businesses that generate digital and digitally enabled jobs. In this respect, I have set aside 1 billion Kenya shillings as seed capital for the fund. I encourage the youth and women to take advantage of this funding window to establish and grow their business. Mr. Speaker, in order to take full advantage of the preference and reservations in the Procurement Act and to promote local industries through the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative, we are in the process of developing a catalogue of items that are locally manufactured, assembled, mined, or grown in Kenya, and which will be given priority in public procurement. Accordingly, no tax exemptions will be provided for any items on the catalogues. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, with effects from 1st July 2019, all ministries, departments, agencies, and other public entities are required to give exclusive preference in procurement of motor vehicles and motorcycles from farms that have assembly plants in Kenya. This will go a long way in spurring the growth of local auxiliary industries and enterprise and create employment opportunities to the youth. Mr. Speaker, We have received numerous complaints relating to the late payment and even non-payment of suppliers by businesses and contractors who enjoy relatively superior bargaining position. The most affected are small and medium enterprises. To address this situation, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed amendments to the Competition Act to empower the Competition Authority to deal with abuse of buyer power and ensure prompt payment to suppliers. The proposed amendment shall also provide for penalties for infringement of these provisions. Further, Mr. Speaker, going forward, the National Treasury will endeavor to ensure that payments to suppliers of goods and services to the national government are made within a maximum of 60 days. This, Mr. Speaker, will support our MSMEs and the business community. I expect all the 47 county governments to take cue from this and ensure prompt payment for all supplies delivered to their respective counties. Mr. Speaker, government will streamline the process of pre-verification of conformity, PVOC, so that our business communities stop suffering demurrage charges and other costs while clearing their goods at the port of entry. This has been caused by additional inspection of imports by the Kenya Bureau of Standards and a host of other agencies. Mr. Speaker, to address this challenge, it has been decided that once the pre-verification of conformity has been done at the point of export and information related to our customs and standards teams, the same goods should not be subjected to further inspection unless there is a prior intelligence on non-compliance. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the logistics at the port and at the inland container depot will be streamlined to have customs and essential standards team only. Mr. Speaker, turning to expenditures, we must ensure that our scarce resources are used in most efficient and effective manner. Accordingly, since the start of this financial year, government has implemented new initiatives to contain growth of expenditure. First, we adopted a zero-based budgeting process to weed out non-priority expenditures from the budget. Second, we have adopted a policy of no new projects to ensure that government completes ongoing projects. Third, we are reviewing the portfolio of externally funded projects with a view to restructuring and realigning them with the Big Four plan. And fourth, we are taking measures to reduce spending on some specific programs which are not of high priority. All these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, have helped to lower our expenditures. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to take bold actions to contain our expenditures further in the next financial year in order to further reduce the deficit. This will entail the following. Mr. Speaker, the public sector wage bill continues to rise, leaving fewer and fewer resources for development. Certainly, this is not a good practice, and no meaningful development can be realized unless we reverse the trend. Mr. Speaker, in order to contain the wage bill, I propose that we limit strictly the extension of services for the significant number of civil servants who are retiring at the age of 60 years. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we will restrict new recruitment to key technical staff, security personnel, teachers, and health workers. Further, Mr. Speaker, a cleansing of the wage bill will be undertaken to root out ghost workers. Government will also fast-track migration away from the current integrated payroll and personnel database system to the IFMIS human resource module to improve payroll management. Mr. Speaker, expenditure on domestic and foreign travel has been growing due to frequent travels. To limit this expenditure, we are exploring the use of a more efficient cost-cutting approach, including use of electronic card system for all public officers traveling within and outside the country. This card would be preloaded with subsistence allowance to be expended by officers traveling on official duty on eligible expenditures only. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet is considering a new government transport policy that will standardize the institutional framework for fleet management and use of fuel cards across government in order to improve efficiency and cut costs. In addition, the policy will promote local industries by requiring that all government vehicles be procured only from the locally assembled plants. Mr. Speaker, the government has been leasing office space at higher than market rates, resulting in huge costs to government. Beginning 1st July 2019, all procurement of office accommodation by government will be standardized with uniform cost leases, and existing contracts will be renegotiated to ensure a standard rate. Mr. Speaker, we are on course towards providing an electronic end-to-end solution on all procurement processes. Mr. Speaker, these will significantly enhance efficiency, transparency, and accountability in procurement. It will further provide procurement audit trails, enhance reporting and procurement analytics for better monitoring of the public procurement system, efficient and electronic archiving of procurement records, and availability of online appeal and complaint mechanism, among others. Mr. Speaker, we are now in the final stage of issuing the new public procurement and asset disposal regulation to fully operationalize the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act of 2015. Our assessment shows that significant savings can be achieved under framework procurement and the new institutional arrangement for common user items that have been instituted in the new regulations. Mr. Speaker, the pension budget has increased by over threefold in the last 10 years, from 25 billion in 2008-2009 to 86 billion in the current financial year. This is unsustainable. Between February and May this year, we conducted a payroll cleansing exercise for pensioners and dependents at the Huduma centers across the country to authenticate the approximately 270,000 recipients of monthly pension paid by the government. We are finalizing the analysis and we expect cost savings. Pension management will also be improved with migration to IFMIS since last month. Mr. Speaker, to address the challenge of rising pension budget, we have finalized a new national pension policy and public service superannuation scheme. This scheme, which will be rolled out in the financial year 2019-2020, will ease the pension burden on the exchequer and free resources for other critical national priorities, while at the same time ensuring that the pension budget remains sustainable. This scheme will allow portability of pension benefits, thus allowing free movement of staff into and out of government. Mr. Speaker, the government will issue public investment management regulations, which will provide a framework for appraising and approving new projects to be funded through government budgets. In order to enhance transparency and accountability, all approved and ongoing projects will be available in the Public Investment Management Information System portal. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the expenditures measures that I have just enumerated, domestic revenue mobilization will be critical to helping us achieve our fiscal deficit targets. I will be coming back later in this budget statement to our proposed taxation measures that will make our tax system more efficient and strengthen our revenues. Meanwhile, in terms of administrative measures to enhance revenue collection and seal revenue loopholes, a number of initiatives are underway, including sustaining the fight against illicit and counterfeit trade that was launched last year. KRA will continue to strengthen and upgrade the ICT system, including the full rollout of the integrated custom management system, which has been delayed for too long. Information sharing through MOUs with other jurisdictions to support fight against cross-border tax evasion will also be implemented. Revenue enhancement initiatives that target, among others, enhanced scanning of containers to detect concealment, implementation of regional electronic cargo tracking system to tackle transit diversion, implementation of new debt collection strategy, resolution of tax dispute, and enhancing investigative capacity to support revenue collection. Mr. Speaker, we expect the above administrative measures to significantly boost our revenue efforts going forward. Mr. Speaker, In the coming financial year, we expect revenue, including A&A, of 2.1 trillion. Expenditure and net lending are projected at 2.8 trillion, leaving a fiscal deficit, including grants, of 6 or 7.8 billion. In relation to GDP, this deficit translates to 5.6%, a decline from 6.8% in this financial year and 7.4% last financial year. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal deficit of 5.6% of GDP will be financed by net external financing of 324 billion and net domestic financing of 283.5 billion. Mr. Speaker, we shall continue to remain on this planned path of reducing the fiscal deficit in the medium term in order to create more fiscal space and to reduce the public debt. Mr. Speaker, resource mobilization through borrowing will be in accordance with the Public Financial Management Act 2012 and guided by the annual medium-term debt management strategy, which this House approves annually, and which seeks to minimize costs and risks on public debt and borrowing. Official development assistance on high concessional terms will be preferred for some of the external financing, while medium to long-term treasury bonds will remain the primary source for domestic financing. Mr. Speaker, Kenya continues to meet its debt service obligation promptly with no accumulation of debt arrears. Public debt is within sustainable levels, and the debt burden is projected to decline over the medium term as we implement the fiscal consolidation plan. Mr. Speaker, the loan proceeds we have contracted, primarily from our multilateral and bilateral development partners, have been used to finance development expenditures, including in such areas as ports, railway, roads, energy, and water. This infrastructure is critical to the expansion of our potential growth and regional competitiveness in making Kenya the African hub for transportation, industrial, and service sectors. Nevertheless, the borrowed resources must be used wisely. Accordingly, the recently established Public Investment Management Unit will be appraising all infrastructure projects before such projects are committed in the budget in order to establish their value for money, affordability, economic return for the benefit of the current and future generation in line with our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, we have constituted and strengthened the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury under the Director General to be responsible for public debt management and operations. We have initiated a set of reforms to promote development of domestic debt market, an important source of financing for our development program. In particular, Mr. Speaker, we plan to roll out measures to enhance transparency and predictability in the issuance and trading process for treasury bills and bonds to enhance efficiency, lower costs and risk, as well as develop an effective yield curve for government domestic debt securities. Given the importance of Eurobonds in our debt portfolio, we will strengthen the debt office to adopt modern liability management instruments to reduce cost and settlement risk, in addition to introducing an investor relations unit at the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, county governments in the coming financial year will receive a proposed allocation of 371.6 billion, of which 310 is the equitable share and 61.6 billion will be conditional transfers, including 38.7 billion from our development partners. Mr. Speaker, I am well aware that the proposal I have outlined above on the division of revenue between the national and county government is subject to negotiation under the Joint Mediation Committee established by the two houses of Parliament. We look forward to the speedy conclusion of the mediation process, which we expect will fully take into account the provision of Article 203 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage the counties to optimize own sources of revenue, the National Treasury, in collaboration with Council of Governors, will implement the national policy to support enhancement of county government own sources of revenue. Further, as per the presidential directive issued in February 2019, the National Treasury has established a multi-agency team to develop and implement an integrated revenue management system for county governments. This initiative is aimed at eliminating the leakages and large costs currently incurred by counties in their revenue collection processes. Mr. Speaker, during this financial year, the County Government Revenue Raising Process Bill 2018 was submitted to the National Assembly. Pursuant to Article 209(5) of the Constitution, this bill aims to regulate the introduction of levies by county governments while ensuring that counties do not prejudice national economic policies, cross-country economic activities, or national mobility of goods, services, capital, and labor. I urge this House to prioritize the enactment of this bill in order to ensure better regulation of the process of introducing new levies by county governments to safeguard the gains made in improving our business climate. Mr. Speaker, we expect counties to manage their finances in a manner that is consistent with the fiscal responsibility principles as set out in the PFM Act 2012 with respect to the development spending allocation and control of expenditure on personnel emolument. Mr. Speaker, we also expect counties to adhere to the policy of clearing pending bills, pursuing austerity measures, and completing ongoing projects before embarking on new ones. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to highlights of the government spending priorities in the coming financial year. Total program spending for 2019-2020 amounts to 2.8 trillion. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President has outlined 4 big areas of focus. These are universal health care, affordable housing, increasing manufacturing contribution to GDP, and food and nutritional security. Mr. Speaker, let me outline how the budget speaks to the President's priorities. Ministries, departments, and agencies, while finalizing the expenditure estimates for the next financial year and medium term, were required to align their proposals towards realization of the Big Four plan. In total, I have allocated approximately 450.9 billion to the Big Four plan drivers and their enablers. Mr. Speaker, a healthy population is key in the attainment of socio-economic development. It's for this reason that the government has prioritized universal health coverage. To support UHC, I have allocated 47.8 billion to activities and programs geared towards universal health coverage. Some of the specific intervention in this area include scaling up universal health coverage to the rest of the counties, NHIF cover for the elderly and severely disabled. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 7.9 billion from the Sports, Art and Social Development Fund to fund the universal health care initiatives. Mr. Speaker, other allocations to improve health service delivery include 2.9 billion for doctors, clinical officers, nurses internship program. Kenya shilling 14.4 billion for Kenyatta National Hospital, 9.2 billion for Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, 2.3 billion for Kenya Medical Research Institute, 7.4 billion for Kenya Medical Training Centers, and 1.2 billion for Health Workers Internship Program. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to stay focused on providing decent and affordable housing for our citizens. To that end, I have allocated 10.5 billion to cater for social housing and construction of affordable housing units, including housing units for the police and Kenya prisons. Included also is 2.3 billion for public servants housing mortgage scheme and 5 billion for the National Housing Development Fund as contributions by government for its employees. Mr. Speaker, with the recent establishment of Kenya Mortgage Refinance Companies by His Excellency the President, Kenyans will now access affordable mortgage loans for purposes of acquiring homes. KMRC has received capital injection of 1 billion from government and 35 billion credit lines from the World Bank and African Development Bank. KMRC also received 1.2 billion from other stakeholders. These are banks and SACCOs, and a further 400 million is expected from development financial institutions, that is IFC and Shelter Afrique, in the form of equity injection. Mr. Speaker, investment in manufacturing sector is key in transforming Kenya into a middle-income economy. Under the Big Four plan, the goal is to increase its contribution to GDP, create jobs annually, increase FDI, and improve ease of doing business. To support the manufacturing sector, we have scaled up reforms to encourage investment in industrial sheds and parks. The electricity rebate mentioned earlier will also improve competitiveness in the sector. Mr. Speaker, Government has completed the revival of one of the oldest textile company in Kenya, based in Eldoret, Rivertex. It is expected to be launched in the coming weeks. Rivertex is expected to employ over 3,000 employees when fully operational. In this budget, we have allocated a total of 1.1 billion for the development of textile and leather industrial park, Naivasha Industrial Park, and cotton development subsidy. In addition, we have allocated 1.7 billion to support growth of SMEs in the manufacturing sector and 400 million to constituency industrial development centers and 1 billion to modernize facilities in Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute, KIRDI. Mr. Speaker, to enhance food and nutrition security and support our farmers, government is reforming its agricultural policies and regulations, as well as subsidies to farmers, with a view to make them efficient and less prone to rent seeking. With unspent funds for this current financial year and proceeds from sale of maize from strategic reserves, the Strategic Food Reserve Trust Fund will have adequate funds to buy food reserves and intervene to support farmers in accessing inputs in a reformed arrangement in the coming financial year. In this budget, I have set aside 2 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program, 3 billion for setting up coffee cherry revolving fund to implement prioritized reforms in the coffee subsector. In the coming financial year, coffee farmers across the country will be able to access cherry advance at a modest interest rate of 3%. Mr. Speaker, in this current financial year, government supported sugar farmers by paying 2.1 billion debt for cane deliveries to public mills. To cater for the outstanding balances, we have provided 700 million. Other provisions include 1 billion for crop diversification and to revitalize the miraa industry, 800 billion for rehabilitation of fish landing sites, and 700 million for smallholder dairy commercialization. I have also allocated a total of 7.9 billion for ongoing irrigation projects. Mr. Speaker, allow me to turn to the proposed expenditure on enablers that are critical to the realization of the Big Four agenda. I'll start with infrastructure. We will continue with the infrastructure program in order to improve our competitiveness. I'm therefore proposing to allocate 180.9 billion for ongoing roads construction projects, as well as rehabilitation and maintenance of roads. We have also provided 55.8 billion for the completion of Phase 2A of the SGR, 11 billion for the LAPSET project, and 7.2 billion for the Mombasa Port Development Project. Mr. Speaker, to support generation of adequate and affordable energy, particularly for our manufacturing sector, I have allocated 8.6 billion for the geothermal development, 61.2 billion for power transmission and distribution. This includes 4.5 billion for electrification of public institutions, 5.5 billion for last mile connectivity, and 1.3 billion connectivity subsidy, 1 billion for street lighting, and 1.5 billion for transformers in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, a safe and secure environment is a precondition for achieving the Big Four agenda. Therefore, I have provided 326.5 billion for security agencies, which include 121.6 billion for defense, 7.7 billion for National Intelligence Service, 26.9 billion for Prisons Department, 140 billion for State Department of Interior. The allocation to the State Department of Interior includes 22.8 billion for house allowance for the police and prisons, and 6.9 billion for police and prisons officers' medical scheme. For the police.
All the members.
Mr. Speaker, education continues to receive lion's share of spending as government continues to provide access to basic and higher education, as well as to skills development and training. 55.4 billion is allocated to cater for free day secondary education and 13.4 billion for free primary education. To increase the teacher to student ratio, we have provided 3.2 billion for the recruitment of additional teachers. Other allocations include 1.5 billion for primary and secondary school infrastructure, 10.3 billion for tuition and tool support for vocational training, 6.8 billion for construction and equipping of technical institutions, 4 billion for examination fee waiver for all Class 8 and Form 4 candidates, and 4 billion for NHIF insurance for secondary school students. Mr. Speaker, I have further set aside 97.7 billion to support university education and 12.6 billion to the Higher Education Laws Board. Mr. Speaker, in my budget statement last year, I highlighted some of the measures to improve governance and transparency and accountability of government. Procurement reforms included the requirement of all ministries, departments, and agencies to continually publish and publicize all details of procurement information and contract awards on the Public Procurement Information Portal. Mr. Speaker, this portal was developed and launched. The Public Procurement Regulatory Authority continues to publish monthly contract award by all public entities in the portal. To date, 385 public entities have been registered in the portal and 5,236 contracts published, valued at 146.5 billion. We expect further transparency with the implementation of new end-to-end e-procurement system fully integrated with IFMIS. Mr. Speaker, to sustain the drive against corruption, I have enhanced allocation to the institutions mandated to fight corruption. In addition, in particular, Mr. Speaker, we have allocated 2.9 billion to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, 3 billion to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, 50 billion to the Asset Recovery Agency, 540.8 billion to the 540 million to the Financial Reporting Center, 7.1 billion to the Criminal Investigation Services, and 5.7 billion to the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to support the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I have allocated 40.5 billion to Parliament and 19.4 billion to the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, the rapidly developing digital economy provides opportunities to boost our economic growth and create jobs. Therefore, we need to invest more in this area to boost literacy and digital skills. We also need to invest in digital infrastructure and improve access to affordable broadband connectivity. Thus, Mr. Speaker, to support ICT sector and take advantage of the digital divide and consolidate Kenya's leading position in technology space, I have allocated 3.2 billion for the digital literacy program, 2.9 billion for government shared services, 2.8 billion for national optic fiber backbone phase 2 expansion, and 1.1 billion for installation of an internet-based 4,000 network. I have also set aside 7.2 billion for ongoing construction of Konza Technopolis complex and another 5.1 billion to support Konza data center and smart city facilities project. Mr. Speaker, to share the benefit of our growing economy and to relieve the blight of our vulnerable members of our society, we have provided 16.6 billion for cash transfers to the elderly person, 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, and 1.1 billion for cash transfers to persons with severe disabilities. Also, we have set aside 2.3 billion for the Kenya Anger Safety Net program and 100 million to support those with albinism and 200 million for the National Council for Persons with Disabilities Fund. Mr. Speaker, to support sports, culture, and arts, I have also allocated 5.3 billion from the Sports, Art, and Social Development Fund to support youth, women, and persons living with disabilities in areas such as sports and arts. Mr. Speaker, to promote equitable regional development, we have provided 41.7 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund and 2.3 billion for Affirmative Action Fund to promote regional equity and for social development. We expect these funds to augment national government functions, especially school infrastructure, to ease the shortages associated with the 100% transition policy. I've also allocated 5.8 billion for the equalization fund to finance programs in the marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, the rest of my presentation summarizes various tax measures and miscellaneous amendments that I intend to introduce through the Finance Bill 2019 and regulations to realize the objective set out in the Big Four plan. The tax policy measures in this budget are expected to generate an additional 37 billion and tax revenue to the exchequer. Mr. Speaker, the new income tax bill that benefited from extensive public consultation is at the final stage of legal drafting before it's submitted to this House shortly. Accordingly, I'll make limited changes to the Income Tax Act to enhance equity and fairness. Mr. Speaker, after 4 years of implementation, there is a need to review the capital gains tax legislation in order to enhance equity and fairness, as well as harmonize the rate with other jurisdictions, including the East African Community region, where the rates ranges from 20 to 30. Consequently, I propose to increase the rate of capital gain tax from 5% to 12.5%. Further, Mr. Speaker, in order to allow for seamless restructuring of corporate entities, I propose to exempt from capital gain tax the transfer of property that is necessitated by restructuring of corporate entities. This measure will allow corporate entities to restructure their operations for efficiency and market penetration. Mr. Speaker, with the increasing demand to mobilize resources, there is need to expand the tax base and enhance our revenue. Over the years, with the expanded economy, there has been an increase in services that are offered on commercial basis, some of which are not within the ambit of withholding tax. I therefore propose to expand the scope of application of withholding tax by subjecting additional services other than management and professional fee to withholding tax. Mr. Speaker, these services include security services, cleaning and fumigation services, catering services offered outside hotel premises, transportation of goods excluding air transport services, sales, promotion and marketing and advertising services. These measures will enhance tax compliance by persons offering these services. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya economy and the world economy at large is fast changing to keep up with technological advancement. In particular, the digital economy is fast evolving, thereby posing challenges to taxation. This, Mr. Speaker, is due to the unparalleled reliance on intangibles and massive use of data and widespread adoption of multi-sided business models and the difficulty of determining the jurisdiction in which value creation occurs. This has led to erosion of our tax base, hence low tax revenue, since the existing system is not equipped to deal with these emerging challenges. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed a raft of tax measures that are aimed at providing the platform of taxation of income generated from digital economy so as to boost our revenue for inclusive economic development. Mr. Speaker, in my budget statement last year, I had indicated that the draft income tax bill 2018 would be submitted to Parliament for enactment. The bill is at advanced stage of legal drafting, and I will soon be submitting the same to this House. This bill will modernize our income tax legislation so as to boost revenue collection. Mr. Speaker, the VAT Act provides for refund of tax where the income tax exceeds the output tax for taxable supplies and full input tax attributed to zero-rated supplies. In 2017, the VAT regulations introduced a formula for determination of the amount of refund payable to taxpayers who supply both zero-rated and standard-rated supplies. However, the application of the formula is adversely affecting exporters, as they are not able to fully recover the excess input tax relating to zero-rated supplies. To address this, I propose to adjust the VAT refund formula in order to ensure that these taxpayers are able to fully recover the portion of input tax relating to zero-rated supplies. This measure will boost Kenya's exports and make them competitive in the international market. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the value-added withholding tax system has been in operation for some time now. However, the implementation of the system has encountered challenges, the major one being a build-up of huge credits, yet the law does not provide for refund of the same to the taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, in order to address this challenge, I propose to reduce the rate of VAT withholding from 6% to 2%. This will not only help reduce the build-up of VAT refunds, but will also help enhance the cash flow of our businesses, community, and stimulate economic activities and job creation. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is positioning itself as a leading assembler of electronics and computers within the region. This development initiative will transform Kenya into a major manufacturer and supplier of electronics and computers in the East African community. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage the growth of this sector, I propose to exempt from VAT locally manufactured motherboards and all inputs used in their manufacture. This will make them more competitive against imported motherboards. Mr. Speaker, the government has made tremendous effort in protecting our environment. The country has banned the use of plastic bags to reduce pollution and provide clean environment to its citizens. However, other forms of plastic waste remain a major cause of both land and water pollution. Mr. Speaker, to address this challenge, there is need to promote plastic waste management by encouraging recycling of plastic waste. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to exempt from VAT all services offered to plastic recycling plants and supply of machinery and equipment used in the construction of these plants. Further, to encourage investment in plastic recycling, I propose to lower corporation tax to 15% for the first 5 years for any investor operating a plastic recycling plant. Mr. Speaker, on matters relating to customs, I have proposed measures intended to make our products more competitive while at the same time protect local industries from unfair competition. This will support the manufacturing sector under the Big Four plan, which is expected to grow to 15% of GDP by 2022. Mr. Speaker, the details of the custom measures will be communicated through the East African Community Gazette and will be effective 1st July this year. I wish to highlight a few of them. Mr. Speaker, our metal and allied sector continues to face stiff competition from imported cheap and subsidized iron and steel products. In order to protect this industry, I have retained the ad valorem rate of import duty at 25% with corresponding specific rates of duty within a wide range of these products which are produced in the region. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has sufficient capacity to produce some paper and paperboard products, and therefore there is need to protect these industries. However, the common external tariff on this product is 10%. To protect manufacturers of these products from unfair external competition, I have proposed that the import duty rate, which was increased last year to 25% for 1 year period, be maintained for a further 1 year period. Mr. Speaker, as you may be aware, the government banned the logging of trees to stop deforestation. However, our manufacturers who use raw timber to manufacture furniture and other products are affected by this measure as they now lack adequate supply of raw timber. To address their blight and at the same time protect our forests, I have proposed to reduce import duty on raw timber from 10% to 0%. In addition, Mr. Speaker, to protect the timber and furniture industry from proliferation of cheap finished timber products and to encourage local production, I propose to retain an ad valorem rate of import duty at 25% with corresponding specific rate of import duty on the products. Mr. Speaker, betting has become widespread in our society, and its expansion has had negative social effects, particularly to the young and vulnerable members of our society. In order to curtail the negative effect arising from betting activities, I propose to introduce excise duty on betting activities at 10% at the amount staked. Mr. Speaker, you'll have an opportunity to look at that. Mr. Speaker, although currently there is low uptake of electric-powered motor vehicles in the country, green energy technology is being embraced in many countries due to environmental benefits and renewability. Kenya too needs to promote the use of this clean type of energy in line with the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which can be achieved through lowering and cost of these vehicles through tax incentive. Mr. Speaker, this will encourage uptake of these vehicles as well as encourage investment in area of the technology. Further, it will support the policy on green energy, thereby reducing carbon emission. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to reduce excise duty on motor vehicles that are fully powered by electricity to 10%. Mr. Speaker, excise revenue has declined from approximately 3% of GDP in 2003-2004 to 2% in 2017-2018. The law currently provides for an annual inflation adjustment for excisable goods that have a specific rate. The adjustment was done last year, and the rates of excise duty on these goods were increased by 5.2%. Mr. Speaker, although the rates will be adjusted again in July by inflation rate provided by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the adjustment may not be adequate to address the declining trend of excise revenue. Mr. Speaker, in order to address this decline and to boost excise revenue, I propose to increase the rate of excise duty on cigarettes, wines, and spirits by 15%. In other words, Mr. Speaker, excise duty on alcohol and tobacco will be increased as follows. A 750 ml bottle of wine will have an excise duty of 136 shillings, which is 18 shillings more from the current rates. The duty of a bottle of whiskey,
All the members, even if you're excited or affected.
The duty of a bottle of whiskey will go up by 24 shillings to Kenya shilling 182 for a 750 ml bottle. The excise duty of a packet of 20 cigarettes will increase by 8 shillings to 61 shillings per packet. Mr. Speaker, the government introduced the growth and the enterprise market segment with favorable listing conditions for SME to raise finance from the capital markets for growth. However, the uptake has not been good in view of the potential back taxes that the enterprises may be facing. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce amnesty on the tax penalties and interest on any outstanding tax for 2 years period to the listing for SMEs that list under the GEMS program to encourage them to list and clear their tax records. The principal tax shall, however, be fully paid. Mr. Speaker, the government is keen to position Kenya as a prime financial center in East and Central Africa. The first step to achieve this is to make our financial services accessible to both Kenyans and our visitors. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the law requires one to have KRA PIN before opening bank account. This poses challenges to visiting foreigners, privileged persons, and foreign investors investing in our financial market. In this regard, I propose to amend the Tax Procedure Act to empower the Commissioner to grant exemptions from the PIN requirement in certain circumstances when opening a bank account. Mr. Speaker, Last year, through the Finance Act 2018, I introduced an anti-adulteration levy on illuminating kerosene in order to check the menace of adulteration of fuel. In addition to reducing the adulteration of fuel products, this levy increased the cost to manufacturers of paint and resin who use illuminating kerosene as input. In order to address this problem, Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce a provision under Miscellaneous Fee and Levies Act 2016 that will allow manufacturers of paint and resin to get refund on the levy paid. Mr. Speaker, in order to further cushion our local manufacturers and facilitate the growth of the sectors, I propose to reduce the Import Declaration Fee, IDF, on intermediate goods and raw materials used by manufacturers from 2% to 1.5%, while increasing the rate on finished goods from 2% to 3.5%. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I propose to raise the Railway Development Levy for finished products from 1.5% to 2% to further cushion our manufacturers. Mr. Speaker, raw hides and skins are currently subject to export levy. This measure has had a significant impact in increasing value addition in the sector. However, the levy does not apply to tanned and crushed hides and skins, which are also being exported at the expense of value addition. Mr. Speaker, in order to further accelerate value addition and promote the manufacturing of local leather products, I propose to impose export levy on tanned and crushed hides and skins at 10%. Mr. Speaker, the Capital Markets Authority is responsible for promoting, regulating, and facilitating the development of an orderly, fair, and efficient capital markets in Kenya. In order to effectively deliver on this mandate, the authority requires powers to sanction the players in the market in case of default. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed amendments to the Capital Markets Act to empower the authority to enforce penalties and sanctions on market players who violate laid down rules and procedures. Mr. Speaker, Policyholders Compensation Fund was established to cushion holders of insurance policies in the event that insurance companies are unable to discharge their services. However, Mr. Speaker, the fund has not been utilized since establishment in 2004, despite 4 insurers going under statutory management. This is because the current provision of the law only allows compensation to claimants of an insolvent insurer. To address these challenges, I have proposed amendments to the Insurance Act and the regulations to bring clarity and enable the fund to be utilized to compensate claimants. Mr. Speaker, border transport has become an important sector in our economy. It is one of the largest employers of our youth and also provides cheap and convenient transport for Kenya. Despite the above benefits, Mr. Speaker, this mode of transport has proven to be very risky to riders, passengers, and even pedestrians. Further, Mr. Speaker, there are accident victims who are mostly from the lower cadre of our society are left to seek financial assistance for treatment from friends and relatives since these borders are not insured. In order to mitigate against this risk, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the Insurance Motor Vehicle Third-Party Risk Certificate of Insurance rules to require all passengers carrying borders and tuk-tuks to have an insurance cover for passengers and pedestrians. Mr. Speaker, retirement benefit schemes that invest in the guaranteed funds are subject to unfavorable terms of exit. In particular, the schemes are required to withdraw funds in installment spread over 3 years, otherwise they suffer a charge of 25% of the fund value. This exposes members to low returns on the fund balances.
On the members,
you will
have your time to discuss.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed to amend the Retirement Benefit Act to reduce the period of transfer to 1 year so as to allow members to access better returns. Mr. Speaker, while both individual and occupational regulations under the Retirement Benefit Act make provisions for creation of reserve funds in the defined contribution schemes. The schemes are not required to make provisions for distribution of reserve fund in the rules. This has made some members exit without accessing their entitlement to the reserve fund. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the occupational pension regulations and retirement benefits regulations to ensure that the existing members receive their equitable share of the reserve fund. Mr. Speaker, last year I introduced amendments to allow contribution for post-retirement medical funds in the occupational and individual retirement benefit scheme. This was meant to enable members of these schemes to contribute to the medical scheme to be assessed after retirement as a form of social security. In order to ensure that many Kenyans enjoy this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, I propose to further amend the umbrella retirement scheme regulations to allow members of the umbrella retirement benefit scheme to contribute towards post-retirement medical funds. This will also contribute to the achievement of universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, in order to establish a legal framework for the operations of the National Electronic Single Window System, I will soon submit the National Electronic Single Window Bill 2019 for deliberation by the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the bill proposes to legislate the use of the National Single Window System as well as to re-establish the Kenya Trade Network Agency. In addition, the bill will also seek to amend various statutes to recognize and formalize the issuance of electronic certificate permits that are currently issued by various agencies through the system. Mr. Speaker, the aim of the interest rate capping introduced in September 2016 was to reduce the cost of borrowing, increase access to credit, and higher return to savings. It's now going to 3 years, and the law has had the opposite effect, with micro, small, medium enterprises starved of credit and the loan books of small banks becoming smaller. Mr. Speaker, you will recall in the Finance Bill 2018, I proposed to amend the Banking Amendment Act 2016 by repealing Section 33B of the Act. The proposal was motivated by the need to enhance access to credit and minimize the adverse impact of interest rate capping on credit while strengthening financial access and monetary policy effectiveness. In addition, I highlighted a number of reforms that we are putting in place to optimize lending to the private sector while at the same time encouraging innovation in the financial sector in Kenya. Already, the Central Bank of Kenya is dealing with the consumer protection issues in the banking sector. Mr. Speaker, given the challenges that the micro, small, and medium enterprises are facing in accessing credit from the banking sector, and cautious of the need to spur business activity, I am in this year's finance bill proposing a repeal of Section 33B of the Banking Act 2016. I'm convinced this will unlock credit to the private sector and in particular to the SMEs. Further, Mr. Speaker, we will be launching an SME credit guarantee scheme in a few weeks' time to deepen access to credit by SMEs without being subjected to complex application procedures and collateral requirements. These, together with the Biashara Kenya Fund and SME Fund, will address the very reason why interest rate caps were introduced. Mr. Speaker, the aforementioned reforms will not only address shortcomings in the credit market, but also catalyze provision of credit to support the government Big Four agenda. Mr. Speaker, the budget is also about insulating ourselves against future risk and sustaining our long-term development agenda. Mr. Speaker, the funds allocated in the budget for infrastructure development are not adequate to meet the growing needs for quality and sustainable services and to support the Big Four plan. In this respect, the government will continue to leverage on the private sector to support infrastructure development through public-private partnership arrangement. Mr. Speaker, we have already made great strides in this area and have awarded the Nairobi-Nakuru Mau Summit toll road project and approved the development of JKIA James Gishuru Nairobi Expressway project to be done under the PPP framework. These projects are expected to commence soon and will significantly reduce traffic in Nairobi City and on the Nairobi-Nakuru highway. Mr. Speaker, as the host nation of the United Nations Environment Programme, Kenya remains a global leader in environmental conservation and sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, we have continued to champion the green economy by aspiring industrial growth in a manner that protects the environment from the effects of climate change. We have also committed to expand our forest cover from 7.2% to 10% target. Mr. Speaker, building on our commitment to foster a sustainable environment, we have issued another ban on single-use plastics in all our protected areas, including national parks, beaches, forests, and conservation areas. The ban shall be effective 5th June 2020. Mr. Speaker, as reiterated by His Excellency the President during his State of Nation address in April this year, our resolve to sustainably manage our natural resources remain unwavering. Mr. Speaker, this is a new sector in our economy. We shall soon export crude oil to establish its commercial viability. In addition, the National Intelligence Service, working with the Department of Defense, is conducting geophysical survey to map out the natural resources across the country. In order to prepare for that, we have finalized the Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill, which is undergoing legal drafting before submission to Parliament for approval. Mr. Speaker, among other things, the Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill proposes the creation of a fund and provides a legal framework to guide the investment of revenue from oil, gas, and mineral resources. It's also important to underscore that other than the cost of managing the fund, all monies in the fund will be used to finance critical development programs, build savings for future generation in order to ensure intergenerational equity and for stability and for stabilizing budget expenditures in the event of fluctuation in the price of natural resources. Mr. Speaker, the government has eased service delivery to the public through digitalization of critical services in the e-citizen portal. We have e-registry and we are digitalizing land transactions, business registration, motor vehicles and driver's license services, and services under the registration of persons, including passports. As a result of the ICT penetration, Mr. Speaker, Kenya has been ranked 7th in Africa in e-commerce uptake and 85 globally in the United Nations Conference and Trade Development UNCTAD Business to Consumer E-Commerce Index. Mr. Speaker, in May 2019, His Excellency the President launched Kenya Digital Economy Blueprint for Africa in Kigali in Rwanda. The blueprint serves as one of Kenya's contribution to Smart Africa Alliance in its role as champion for the digital economy within the alliance and proponent of the African-wide digital economy. Mr. Speaker, the adoption of digital economy framework offers us an opportunity to leapfrog and join nations in the first world and actively contribute to the global economy. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue with this initiative to recapitalize and restructure the banks that are partially or wholly owned by government with a view to creating stronger banks and development financial institutions. In this regard, the government as shareholders in supporting the merger of the National Bank and Kenya Commercial Bank that will result in creation of one of the strongest banks in East Africa. In addition, the merger of Tourism Finance Corporation, IDB Capital, and ICDC to form Kenya Development Bank with the right capacity to support industrial growth of the country by providing long-term development financing. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that His Excellency the President appointed a task force in November 2018 to review our sugar industry with a view to addressing the challenges in the sector. The government will implement the recommendation from the task force and in the meantime pay all outstanding debts owed by sugar farmers. Mr. Speaker, university reforms are critical at this stage. We shall review all universities' public financial and management system, appraise ongoing projects with a view to restructure them, and implement radical measures that will include merger or closure of some universities and universities' campuses that are not able to sustain their operations against the number of students admitted or degree course offered. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the government under the leadership of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta has steered our economy to become the largest and most diverse in the region. Mr. Speaker, we should be proud of this and be ready to guard and further promote our growth and development. Mr. Speaker, the budget I have presented today has undergone a vigorous preparation process in which we have had to make tough decisions in the quest to move our country forward. Faced with limited resources, we have had to make tough choices to cut low priority expenditures. I firmly believe that if we all embrace and support the measures spelled out in this budget, we shall create more jobs and transform the lives of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, this budget takes into account the socio-economic status of our people and their desire for better livelihood and quality of their lives. In summary, Mr. Speaker, this budget responds to the concerns of Kenyans, which include high cost of living, unemployment, poverty, and income inequality, lays a firm foundation for economic transformation and renewal, aligned resources to Big Four, while sustaining allocation to critical infrastructure, as well as proper spending in health, education, and social safety nets, and provide support to youth and growth of SMEs. Mr. Speaker, the actualization of our development goals in the past has largely been driven by Kenya's spirit of peace, hard work, unity of purpose, and national cohesion. Mr. Speaker, these values remain critical for our growth and development. I therefore urge all Kenyans to nurture and promote peace and unity of purpose as fundamentals in building the Kenya we want, a prosperous and peaceful nation in which we all aspire to live in. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank His Excellency the President and His Excellency the Deputy President for their leadership during this budget preparation process. Mr. Speaker, allow me to thank most profoundly you for according me this opportunity to present to this august House the highlights of the 2019-2020 budget, and also for the support the House has accorded the National Treasury in the budget formulation process. I'm also greatly indebted to my cabinet colleagues and the principal secretaries for their support and cooperation throughout the process of preparing this budget. Many thanks to the Budgets and Appropriation Committee led by Chairman Kimani Ichung'wah, Finance and Planning Committee led by Chairman Joseph Limo, and other departmental committees of the National Assembly, as well as the leader of my majority, Aden Duale, for the time and dedication of sifting through the estimates and constructive debates that help refine the budget. And Minority Leader Bandi for the relentless support they have given us. A word of appreciation to the staff of the National Treasury and Planning, led by the Principal Secretary, Dr. Kamau Tuge, who have tirelessly worked long hours to ensure that this budget and supporting document meet the legal timeline. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank Kenyans from all walks of life who gave their suggestions and proposals through the budget-making process. I thank you for listening. Mr. Speaker, in April 2019, I submitted the budget estimates together with the accompanying documents. As I conclude, I further submit the following documents to this august House. One is the budget statement, the Finance Bill 2019, the Competition Amendment Bill 2019, the Insurance Amendment Bill 2019, various legal notices, financial statement for 2019-2020, and 2019 budget policy statement. Also, estimates of revenue, grants, loans for 2019-2020, the 2019 medium-term debt management strategy, budget highlights called the Mwananchi Guide, statistical annex to the budget statement for 2019-2020, and the Public Financial Management Biashara Kenya Fund Regulations 2019. Mr. Speaker, I will soon submit the following bills, which are at advanced stages of legal drafting, to the National Assembly for approval. The Income Tax Bill 2019, the Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund 2019, the Central Bank of Kenya Bill 2019, and the Kenya National Electronic Single Window Bill 2019. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, I wish to thank the Cabinet Secretary for having, for the National Treasury for having ably made a public pronouncement on of the budget policy highlights for the national government for the financial year 2019-2020 and the medium term and the revenue-raising measures. I also wish to confirm, indeed, to all of you honourable members, that in terms of our standing order number 244, paragraph C, subsection 4, that the Cabinet Secretary, as you've all noticed, has submitted to me the Finance Bill 2019 and all other legislative proposals as is stated necessary to actualize the revenue-raising measures for the national government for the financial year 2020-2019. Now, members, it's now my pleasure to invite you to invite all of members, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, other Cabinet Secretaries, and all guests to a reception at the Parliament Courtyard hereafter. Now, honourable members, time being 5:05, it is now time to adjourn. The House stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 18th of June, 2019, at 2:30 p.m.
There you have it, the 2019-2020 budget statement as read by the Cabinet Secretary to the National Treasury and Planning, that is Henry Rotich, having given a mixed bag of goodies. We have some people who are considered winners and some who are losers, and we are going to be looking into some of them, and we see some allocations of budget to different departments and the likes, which we shall be reading in just a bit. And aside from that, we see some of the winners in this are, for instance, we have the recycling plants, which are some of the winners in this budget statement. The importers of raw timber, because they are going to have some relief in regards to tax. Local manufacturers of steel, locally assembled motherboards, that is to ensure that there can be more local manufacturing of computers and the likes. And we have VAT refund claimants as well. And some of the losers here are the betting and lottery farms. Now, betting and lottery farms, in betting and lottery, one of the things is that there'll be an excise duty of 10% of the amount that is staked. That is according to the CS's proposal. And then besides that, we also have the alcohol, cigarettes manufacturers, as I believe, as well as the consumers, because they are the ones who are going to bear the burden of the cost, because what has been said is that there's going to be an increase in excise duty, and that means a cigarette pack is going to be 61 shillings. And aside from that, we are going to have a 750 milliliter of wine is 18 shillings more. And so these are some of the things in regards to the winners and losers. We've seen allocations in regards to the war against corruption. The EACC has received 2.9 billion shillings. And aside from that, we see that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has been allocated 3 billion shillings. The Assets and Recovery Authority has been granted 50 billion shillings. And the FRC has been given 540 million shillings. The DCI, that's for the criminal investigations, has gotten 7.1 billion shillings. So as you can see there, Judiciary has gotten 19.4 billion shillings in terms of allocation. We have the EACC getting 2.9 billion shillings. We have the DCI getting 7.1 billion shillings. The Auditor General has been allocated 5.7 billion shillings. The Judiciary has been given 19.4 billion shillings. In addition to that, in terms of the war against corruption, the ODPP has been granted 3 billion shillings, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We also have capital gains tax going up to 12.5%, a significant increase which is then a concern. And then we also have the VAT withholding up to has gone to 2%, down from 6%. And we'll be having experts tell us what this means for your VAT. And we have a betting excise of 10% of the stake, of the amount that has been staked, amount has been staked. And so these are some of the few nuggets from that. The counties are going to get 371.6 billion shillings, and of this, the equitable share is 310 billion shillings. We also have the revenue, the total revenue expected is 2.1 trillion shillings. We also have the Big Four receiving 450 billion shillings. We also have training for medics, that is nurses, doctors, and the likes, has been given 2.9 billion shillings. Social housing, which includes those of police officers, has gotten 10.5 billion shillings in Rotich's budget, and irrigation services have been given 7.9 billion shillings. And we still have a lot more we can look into, but now I want to cross over to Parliament, where we can get some reactions from the legislators and various leaders to give us some brief on Victor Kipropi standing by to give us this. Victor?
Well, Dan, you know, what we knew this morning was that indeed the budget could be around 3.02 trillion shillings. But what we didn't know much about it, Dan, was actually how the National Treasury was planning to fund this huge or humongous budget, you might say, and especially with regards with the tax collection reforms and another measures of collecting and filling the gap that needs to be collected through revenue, that is 2.1 trillion shillings. And we have with us Alego Usoga, Member of Parliament Samuel Atandi, who's going to give us his reactions with regards to the new tax collection proposals by the National Treasury.
Thank you very much. In the morning we were concerned about, and we were waiting on the proposals that the Minister was going to bring on revenue enhancements. And I think from his presentation it appears the Minister has run out of many options on the table for him to realize revenue projections. For instance, on expanding the tax base, he's proposing the introduction of VAT withholding tax on sectors such as cleaning, catering. You know, those are small, tiny sectors that would not be able to realize revenue for him to be able to meet the budget shortfalls. That is one. Two. Well, one of the substantial proposals that he has brought on the table has to do with the introduction of interest cap law, which is intending to repeal. I think that is a positive proposal because that is going to enhance the performance of the financial sector. You remember, financial sector contribution to GDP has been dwindling since this law was put in place. Yeah. So if that law is repealed, I think that will have some impact. Also, that it will have...
Let me take this opportunity to welcome you to this press conference following the reading of the budget speech we have just done now in the chambers. In a nutshell, the theme of this budget was creating jobs, transforming lives, and so that we can harness the Big Four plan. We are making this budget when our economy is doing well, growing faster than countries in the region and also globally. There are also challenges, obviously, globally, as you know, the trade tensions that is happening between the US and China, and of course also the risk related to Brexit. So this is the context at which we are preparing this budget. So of course this can affect the outlook that we have indicated in our fiscal framework. This budget attempts to tie together the policy and planning documents that we have already shared with you. As you know, the medium-term plan was launched some time back, and we are already also, as a country, committed to implement the SDG goals. And of course, here at home, we are focusing on the Big Four agenda. So the budget that we have read today tries to address the development priorities that we have set ourselves in those documents. We have made a lot of progress with implementing the Big Four plan. As you know, this started almost a year ago. We have in the manufacturing sector, the sector rebounded last year. We had a growth of about 4.5% in the manufacturing sector. And this is attributed to the policies that were implemented, particularly fighting illicit trade, counterbands, and so that we can ensure that genuine businesses grow. On the food security, agriculture did very well last year, growing by about 6.4%. Of course, supported by the favorable weather, but also the policies that were put in place to boost smallholder productivity. As you all know, that we are already doing a pilot study or a pilot work on universal health care for the 4 counties, and we are going to roll out this in the next financial year. And of course, the National Housing Development Fund has been set up. We are addressing the challenges, and we'll soon expect that to take off. But meanwhile, a lot of work is happening in the affordable housing program, including the establishment of Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company that we launched about a month ago. So this budget that I've just read, it tries to build on these successes and also addressing the challenges that we think Kenyans are facing, particularly the business environment that we have currently. There are challenges facing SMEs and also small businesses. So we have tried to address these challenges from the speech that I've just read. We also want to address the concerns that have been raised with respect to our spending priorities. You notice that I've mentioned quite a number of initiatives in the expenditure side that attempt to address this. We are also responding to the challenge of boosting our revenues so that we can finance our programs, and also responding to the challenge of stabilizing and reducing our debt. And that is the reason why I did indicate why we are planning to lower our deficit so that we can have debts that are sustainable. So in terms of what we are doing to accelerate growth and address the challenges facing our SMEs, the most important thing is always we need to maintain our macro stability. You have witnessed over the last 3 or so years that inflation, exchange rate, and interest rates have remained very stable, and we intend to continue that going forward with implementing appropriate monetary and fiscal policies. We will also continue to deepen reforms in the business sector so that we can reduce the cost of doing business. We will also continue to lower the cost of power so that manufacturers can actually be competitive. And I did mention in my speech that already we have designed a rebate which manufacturers can claim up to 25% of the electricity expenditure, which will help them to lower the cost. The issue of VAT refunds has come out very big when we discuss with the business community, and we have taken measures. We are going to audit or verify the existing stock of VAT refunds within 1 or so months, and we should be able to pay that as soon as possible. And then we'll also address other refunds that was brought about by zero rating and VAT withholding, so that we can ensure that our businesses get the necessary liquidity. You've heard people talking about that there isn't money in the economy and all that, so we're trying to push liquidity back to the businesses by ensuring that the refunds that are locked up at the KRA goes into the system. I've talked about consolidating the 3 institutions that have been funding SMEs or our youth, women, and people with disability to create one big Biashara Kenya fund. So that and I have already tabled the regulations to set up that. The issues of custom clearance are also issues that we are addressing. I did mention what we are doing. Once the goods have been cleared in abroad, they don't need to undergo again clearing by KEBS here unless they are suspected to have items that are not been declared. So, and quite a number of other measures that I've mentioned. I've also indicated issues to do with prompt payment. A lot of issues have been raised about why are we not paying small scale businesses, and as directed by His Excellency the President in Madaraka Day, we are going to at least clear most of the AGBO payments by the end of this month. And already the supplementary bill was just passed today, this afternoon. And now we are just waiting that to be accented, and we begin to pay all the outstanding verified pending bills. And of course the other bills will also be addressed as well, and also ensure that even if we cross in the new financial year, these receives priority. We also amended the Competition Authority Act so that we can give the Competition Authority the teeth and power to enforce contracts that sets out the payment period. We've seen businessmen being challenged by the fact that businesses have not been paying on time, and sometimes they go under, and when they go under, they are not able to recover their money. So, particularly some of the big departmental stores which have not been able to pay suppliers on time. So we have addressed that issue so that the Competition Authority can investigate and put corrective actions so that we can actually ensure prompt payment. I also mentioned about what we call Ajira Fund. There are many youth who are already engaged in doing work through the internet, and they are paid, but sometimes they do not want to disclose the sources of their income. So instead of them fearing the taxman, we have just provided a flat rate of 10,000 per year. So if you earn 100,000 per month, you'll still just pay 10,000 per year, and that is in lieu of tax. So once you pay that, KRA will not follow you on the income tax for a period of 3 years. But that money will go to a Ajira Fund that we have set up, and that Ajira Fund will be used to support business proposals coming from the youth, particularly those who are that are digital related businesses. There are many innovations coming from the youth, but they lack the capital to start up the business. So this Ajira Fund will provide that, and we have dedicated it to support that. In terms of improving efficiency of our expenditures, I have mentioned a raft of measures that we are going to do. Already we are addressing this. As you know, we did a zero-based budgeting. We have adopted a no new project policy. So in the next financial year, we are not going to do new projects, but just do the portfolio of projects that we already have in the budget is huge enough for us to focus on that, pay those, and get them done to completion before we initiate new projects. So that is one of the innovations. We are also working with the development partners to make sure that all these projects are actually absorbed in a faster pace. I did mention about what we are doing in our wage bill reforms. We will be limiting extensions of contracts for those people who are retiring, so that we can reduce the wage bill. We are also only limiting recruitment to some key technical and key staff. And also we are going to cleanse the wage bill, especially as we migrate from IPPD to IFMIS HR module, which we think that module will be more efficient and also tie up with the pension module, which we have already integrated with IFMIS. So with those, we expect that there will be some saving, and there will be efficient processing of payrolls and also pension management. And then I did mention about the domestic and foreign travel. We are coming up with approaches that are more efficient and limit, or provide disincentives of travels, and we will be providing details on that. The government transport policy is with Cabinet. As soon as that is approved, we will be implementing perhaps in coming next financial year, and this will ensure that we standardize vehicles. We have a better institutional arrangement of managing vehicles through a fleet management system using cards, so that we reduce wastage of government vehicles, and all government vehicles will be sourced locally going forward. Office accommodation, we have noticed that there are ministries staying in one building, but they are paying different leases. We want to standardize that so that government departments that are housed in commercial premises pay a standard rates across the board, so that we can achieve savings. We are also pursuing procurement reforms. We are going to come up with an end-to-end procurement system to augment what we have currently under IFMIS, and that will also help in addressing procurement-related issues. We have come up with a public investment management unit at the Treasury. So all new projects, before they are implemented, they must be subjected to a new guidelines, right from feasibility, the preparation, procurement, budgeting, and contract management. All that will be done in a more coordinated fashion, as opposed to what has been happening, where ministries just come up with projects and they are not tied up properly. The budget that we have submitted, we are expecting to raise about 1.8 trillion in terms of revenue. That added the A&A comes to 2.1 trillion. Given the measures that I have indicated in my budget speech, and you have already taken note of a raft of measures that are taxation proposals that have already laid out, so that we can raise this revenue. Also, KRA is being reformed, and we are expecting also efficient and better collection of revenue, so that we can achieve our target and get out of this problem of having always revenue collections that are not within target. In terms of expenditure, we are looking at about 2.8 trillion. I know there sometimes there have been quotation of 3 trillion budget. The difference is the redemptions, both domestic and external redemptions, which is about 250 billion. So if that is combined, it will come to the figure that have been indicated. But the expenditures that we are going to execute basically are 2.8 trillion, which is about 25.7% of GDP. So our expenditures have been coming down. It was at some point about 27 or 30% of GDP. In terms of deficit, the deficit has been coming down. At some point, our deficit was about 9%. Now it's coming down to, the other year was 7.4. This year that we are closing, we expect the deficit to be about 6.8 in the supplementary budget, and the budget that I've just presented, the deficit is 5.6%, and we'll progressively reduce the deficit to below 4% in the medium term, so that we can borrow less, both domestic and externally, and lower our debt to GDP ratios, and which is a concern Kenyans have been raised about our debt level. But I just want to ensure Kenyans that our debt continues to remain sustainable, even with these deficits that we have programmed. But we want to pursue our consolidation plan so that we can ensure that our debt dynamics remain sustainable. And we are going to finance this both from the deficit of which is translates to about 607 billion. We are going to finance this from external and domestic sources, almost on a 50-50 basis. The issue of transfers to counties, the proposal that we have in Parliament is a total funding of about 372 billion, of which 310 is the equitable share. As I indicated in my speech, I know there have been discussions with the two houses, and I understand they have not reached an agreement. I believe they will find a way of addressing this matter so that we can conclude very soon, so that counties can be able to prepare their budgets in the next for the next financial year. So in terms of taxation proposals, I won't go into the details, but in a nutshell, the custom proposal are of course governed by the East African Custom Management Law. We expect the Secretariat in Arusha to issue a gazette notice that will implement the import duties that we agreed among the 5 countries in the region for custom duties. But largely it protects our industry. As you know, we want to grow our manufacturing base. The VAT, I have addressed the issue of lowering the withholding tax. Currently, the withholding tax is 6%. We have lowered that to 2% so that we can eliminate this accumulation of VAT refunds, which has been a challenge. We have also zero-rated denatured bioethanol to promote the use of clean energy and a number of other proposals. Excise duty has gone up for alcohol cigarettes by 15%. Also, excise duty for motor vehicles which are above 1500 cc has gone. Excise duty will go up from 20 to 25%, and those which are high capacity will go up from 30 to 35%. I think that's something that wasn't in my speech, but it is already in the finance bill. The betting, as also we have introduced 10% tax on betting on stakes. So if you are betting and you are betting, say, 100 shillings, immediately there is 10% that you have to give to exchequer by just staking. So that will be also in the finance bill. The income tax, as I said, we are introducing a new income tax bill shortly. It is under drafting, and we hope this will be done by mid-July, in about 3 or so weeks. But we have made a few changes. The capital gain tax have gone up from 5% to 12.5%, and this is still below what is obtaining in the region. Levies, IDF, we have raised IDF for finished goods from 2 to 3.5, but we have lowered IDF for intermediate and raw materials to 1.5 from 2%. So this is also protecting the industry and also safeguarding the revenue in that areas. I won't go into details for expenditure priorities, but I'll just say that a total of about 450 billion has been set aside for Big Four, both for directly the ministries that are handling the Big Four and those which are enablers or supporting the Big Four. So I won't go into the details, but the expenditure priorities have been realigned to support the Big Four agenda. I think also one important thing to note is that I have proposed to Parliament the repeal of Section 33B of the Banking Act. This is basically the interest rate cap, and I want to say that the intention of Parliament was actually, by introducing caps, the idea was that it will boost credits. But what we have seen over the last 2.5 years is the opposite. And I think now it's very clear, many Kenyans, that people who used to access credit before the interest rate cap used to access it, but at a higher price. But it's better to still get credit than disappearing the way it has happened now. In any case, those who are not able to get credit from the banking sector has looked for alternative ways of getting credit, particularly from the Shylocks, which are actually charging at about 30% per month, which translates to about 300% per year. So I think it's time that we address this issue, because credit to private sector is growing at around 4-5%. I don't think that is really what we should be aiming. Small SMEs are struggling; they don't get credit. I think it's now time to the public supports this, because we have seen clearly that it ends up having unintended consequences as opposed to what was thought it will help. So in a nutshell, that is in summary the budget highlights that I've just read in the National Assembly. And I am here with my team from the National Treasury, who we have worked closely over the last few days to come up with all these documents and the speech. And I think I'll stop there and invite questions so that we can close and go join the rest outside there. Please be loud because I can hear some noise there. I hope we'll be able to.
CS National Treasury Henry Rotich making clear some of the pointers that were raised during his budget speech in Parliament just not too long ago. And we have got a lot in store for you. Come to the bulletins at 7 and 9 p.m. The breakdown to understand what it means for you. And if you're buying a car, there's news for you according to what he said. My name is Dan Mwangi. We've been with you through this broadcast right from 9 a.m. when you broke for Swahili at around 11 a.m. up to this point, and we're still going to be holding your hand as we explain to you what the budget proposals mean and the different policy directives. My name is Dan Mwangi. Have yourself a great evening.